Oh man, Chad, I think you turned the music off.
I did. I can do that as a
Well,
speaker.
no. It just I think when you make a note, it's really dumb. Like it's designed really poorly. Like if anyone says anything, it just shuts off automatically. It's not your
Oh,
fault.
I thought I was still muted and such.
I don't listen. I'm just the messenger. I don't know how it works. I didn't design it either.
Well, whatever it is, it sucks.
Yeah, it does. When's Elon gonna fix this app?
Chad, Cow, GM.
Chad.
Sup, brother?
Nothing much.
I've been quite ill the last couple of days, so my voice and nose is all fucked. So I'll try to keep muted as much as I can.
Dang. You sound a bit congested. I'm a little sniffly too, but I think it's just like allergies. I don't know.
Yeah, guys. What we got going on here this week? We released the Q1 ecosystem report yesterday. Uh, Definitely check that out. That's probably I think we're gonna start doing like a quarterly article like that. I think that's just like the best cadence to put out new new updates and things like that. And Eric Voorhees was putting around that some of the stats all around Twitter yesterday. Like see like a ton of people going and commenting and seeing like our high level stats, and it's pretty cool to see just how much growth there's been, especially just in the first quarter. It's kind of hard to think about like how much growth this protocol has had, but uh, looking at some of the high level stats, like it's pretty clear, what direction things are growing in. So, you guys want to roll through some of these top level stats, real quick, and we can just review some of the highest level.
Yeah, one of the funny things from Eric's tweet that I saw from the general channel in the Discord was this dude was just saying like, "Hey, I can trade ETH to Bitcoin with this other exchange, this other DEX," and they were like, "Hey, man, THORChain powers that one." He's
Oh
like,
yeah,
"No, it's not. No, it's not." And we're just like, "Yeah, dude, it is." It's like, well, my trade actually happened through a SEX, so I'm like, okay, well, then what the hell's the point of this entire thread then? Because
That's funny.
yeah,
That's
we
a
all we all know you can trade through sexes. That's not really anything interesting or new.
that's a sign of what's to come. Just everyone trading with THORChain without even realizing it.
yeah. I
This
saw
is the
that.
way.
It was someone was talking about RocketX Exchange and like been in talks to them for a while. They're actually integrating Rango's API into their platform, and I don't know too much like I don't know like too much like granular details about like RocketX itself, but yeah, it was just that is really interesting when people are like, oh yeah, like I did it on this other exchange, but yeah, it's just powered by THORChain. So like yeah, obviously Rango uses THORChain on their back end. So RocketX, I don't believe they're actually live with THORChain yet, so they might be like I don't know if they have a different solution. Like I'm not really too familiar with it, but I know that they are in the process of integrating THORChain. We're helping them out along that. So I like hopefully that should be done in the next like month or so, along with some other integrations uh like Unizen, like some of the ones that are public that people are kind of talking about because they're really near the finish line. So yeah, RocketX is just another one of those exchanges that's going to be powering native Bitcoin swaps through THORChain, and they don't even know, and they don't need to know. It's great.
This is the way. This is the way.
If someone requesting to come up on stage, let's see what's up. Darius, what's up, man? Did you have a question or something? All right, well, I'll give you a minute to collect your thoughts. I'll keep it rolling here with some of the high level stats.
Hello?
Yeah, dude. Hey, oh, there you go, Darius. What's up?
Hi, guys. Quite impressed with the project. Quick question on the end product. In the case of a system malfunction or critical fault, what will happen to the Bitcoin in that end product? Would it be released? Would it be accessible or locked in?
That's a very general question. I would need more specifics about the scenario that you're talking about to be able to answer it.
Meaning, if I put the Bitcoin into this end product, is there any scenario where it could become locked in forever, or what would be the ways to get back access to it?
You're asking a question. If I'm just make sure I want to understand your question. You're asking that in the scenario where you add, Bitcoin into savers or something like this, is there any scenario in which you couldn't get it back?
Correct.
Is that your question?
Yes.
I would say yes. That's probably true with every system on the planet. I don't know. There's no system that exists that doesn't have that. Do you know what I mean? Like, there could be hypothetically some sort of exploit. You could lose your private keys. There's probably, a dozen things I can think of off the top of my head. That's probably true with every financial instrument on the planet.
I think a simple way of putting it is yes, you're still relying on THORChain to be working properly and to, everything needs to be going along as it is for you to be able to rely on that, right? Like, yes, there are catastrophic, rare, highly unlikely scenarios where, like, yeah, if THORChain ceases to exist, then that definitely affects savers. So your Bitcoin isn't just like completely sitting there. It's controlled by the protocol and used in liquidity and such.
Understood. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Cool, man. Yeah, if anyone just has like random questions, you can always just request to come up. So yeah, thanks for coming up and speaking for a minute. Let me get you off the stage. All right. Yeah, let's run through some of the top level stats real quick, because I think a lot of these are pretty interesting to call out. Like first being the total volume of the network from this is in the entire first quarter. So January 1st to March 31st, and $1.2 billion of total volume, and the highest daily volume being around 37 million. So pretty incredible with volume, honestly. Total liquidity, so dual-sided liquidity, from 93 million to 122 million, about a 30% increase in like top level liquidity, dual-sided liquidity. And savers vaults went from about 9 million to about 26 million, or 183% increase in just steady savers deposits from January 1st to today. Obviously, these are in US dollar terms. You could measure all these in like nominal terms, like you could measure them in Rune or Bitcoin or whatever, but standardized to US dollar just to make things it's a little bit more simple to comprehend, especially when you talk about different assets and things like that. So that's why it kind of defaults to dollar terms. But there's some great dashboards that are linked in the article. It's pinned to the top here, and it was just tweeted out. It's the THORChain Q1 ecosystem report. That's just what we're running through real quick. Liquidity fees collected. So this is like the total amount of liquidity fees for all the swaps. It's about $1.9 million, just shy of 2 million collected for. I believe that's collected total, which goes to both nodes and liquidity providers. So and so the entire breakdown of LP earnings is about 30. It's close to 30% from earned just from these organic trading fees, and then about 70% from block rewards. And obviously, we've seen some really high volume days where liquidity fees have completely flipped block rewards, and that's obviously the direction that we're trying to go, up and to the right with liquidity fees in terms of like flipping the regular block rewards that are coming out of the reserve, and also providing revenue towards LPs. Top swap routes. Some interesting stuff here, and some of this I feel like is kind of a function of the top integrations. So let me just go through them first, then we can kind of put some of these into context. So first being the Bitcoin and Rune swap route. So that's about 194 million US dollar volume going through there. Ethereum and Rune about 188 million, and then BUSD 134 million, and then fourth you see a non-Rune pair for the first time, and it's Bitcoin to Ethereum. So that's obviously one of the most popular swap rates, especially on something like Trust Wallet, which I think definitely contributes a lot towards that. And then also we have BUSD and Bitcoin, which is the deepest stablecoin pool, and Bitcoin doing about 50 million in USD volume over the first quarter. So those are the top 5 swap rates. And again, like I think some of that is biased toward definitely arbitrage, because a lot of these are Rune pairs. So like when arbs are going, they're normally going like Bitcoin to Rune in synths, obviously, rather than like doing a straight Bitcoin to Ethereum swap. But you can really see the impact of something like a Trust Wallet in there with a very high volume from like a Bitcoin to Ethereum swap route, which I thought was pretty interesting. And moving down the line, the top 5 interfaces. So it's pretty clear like there's like 5 interfaces which just drive the most volume and liquidity fees and just total number of swaps to THORChain. And they go as follows. So first, Trust Wallet did about 40 million in swaps, and that's also with Trust Wallet iOS only being released in mid February or so. So about 40 million in total volume going through Trust Wallet swaps, about 33,000 swaps, and those, and attributed to those swaps is about 500,000 in liquidity fees. So fees given towards node operators, liquidity providers, just generating yield. So yeah, about 500,000 in total fees just from like one Trust Wallet integration, just to get people a really good idea of just the scale of how big these integrations are and just how much they move the needle. And then second, we see THORSwap doing greater in the total US dollar volume. So about 54 million in total volume going through THORSwap in about 13,000 trades. So Trust Wallet, you see about 33,000 trades, and THORSwap only 13,000 trades, and still a greater US volume. So there's a much higher average swap size on THORSwap, and about 280,000 US dollars contributed liquidity fees through that. Third, we see Shapeshift with about $6 million in volume, with about 1,400 swaps and about 70,000 in fees. Fourth, Thor Wallet with about 5.5 million in total swap volume, with about 3,500 swaps and about 50,000 in fees. And lastly, XDeFi Wallet with about with a little less than 3 million in total swap volume, with about 800 total swaps and about 35,000 in liquidity fees. And also on top of that, so obviously those liquidity fees, those are collected by liquidity providers and node operators, just the stakeholders in the network. But the affiliates, as in the front ends, who can optionally add on an affiliate fee to any transaction, they collected just shy of $200,000, about 188,000 over the first quarter, just from affiliate fees. Obviously, Trust Wallet doesn't charge any affiliate fees. That's pretty much all attributed to THORSwap, Shapeshift, Thor Wallet, XDeFi, and just in whatever proportion that is. But we see really nice revenue being driven towards the front ends, which really deliver the product of THORChain. And obviously, that's really nice for the bottom line in terms of like who's actually in terms of incentivizing the interfaces that are really delivering the product. So like overall, like I'm super happy looking at these stats, and a shout out to Polaris from Nine Realms for putting these together. There's a link to the dashboard in the article, so if you want to check out the queries or do some of your own analysis, definitely check that out and do so. But yeah, what's your guys' reactions to some of those high level stats?
Yeah, I mean, they sound great. I think it'd be really cool. I don't know if you have any of this data offhand or could pull it up, but like to compare quarter over quarter to prior quarters, like I'm really curious how that volume compares to like, bull market times. And obviously like it's been growth through the bear, which is like amazing to see. But yeah, I mean, overall, like also just cool to see like the changing ranks of partner projects, right? Like with Trust coming in, and that still has so much meat on the bone too to increase. So yeah, I mean, great stuff all around.
Yeah, with this dashboard, actually, you can just change the dates arbitrarily. So if you go into the dashboard in the article, it's just linked on the top of the stats there. You can actually change the date parameters. So by default, it's set from January 1st to March 31st, and we'll keep using we'll just keep editing this dashboard for future quarters reports. I think that seems like the best way to go forward. So I believe you should be able to just turn it back and look at how that looks over any arbitrary time frame, but you can also use it to look at like quarter four of last year or something. But it's very clear that things are very up and to the right with this, especially with Trust Wallet being like a very big mover in this ecosystem. Just producing the most liquidity fees, which is the end goal of pretty much all these integrations, is driving liquidity fees towards nodes and liquidity providers, because that's really how that's the way we're going to succeed as a network, is driving revenue towards everybody who's participating in the network, obviously. So that is like far and away the number one goal of at least like myself and the Nine Realms team. I'm sure like everybody else too is very very focused on that goal of driving liquidity fees. So I'm really glad to see that this is like taking shape a little bit, and it's only first quarter of this integration, bear market, like things are looking pretty great on this side.
Yeah, I mean, from a bear market perspective, like going from bull to bear, like obviously we're going to see a decline in trade volume and TVL, all that kind of stuff. It's like the rest of the industry is, just because there's less interest or demand for those kind of services, is because we're in a bear market. But at the same time, is like because we're having higher integrations and more trades happening on an organic level relative to what we saw before, right? In some sense, like we're performing very well as a DEX. Like from a fundamentals perspective, the way to look at it is from a fundamentals perspective, we are performing extremely well relative to our counterparts. Like if you were to look at the top 10 DEXs in the industry, trade volume, last quarter versus this quarter, get an estimated average of the decline of how much trade volume has been reduced. That gives you a sense of like what the macro, effect is. And then you can see how you outperform that kind of macro on the micro, and see how you perform, relative to everybody else in the DEX space, if you wanted to get more technical and do all the comparative work. But I think if you were to do all the work, which I have not because I don't really care to, but I think if you were to do all that work, you'd probably find that we're doing extremely well relative to everybody else. And Savers allows us, we added, another $30 million, which is, something, was it 30% or whatever, like the quantity is, an increase on our TVL trade volume, and more than doubled with the integrations we've been doing lately. Like all these things that are happening right now, and more integrations obviously in the way as well. So we're doing very well for sure, relative to other people, but not relative to the bull market.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's all you can hope for. And then just again, just like foundations being laid, and then when the market's here, like the infrastructure is so much stronger, and it's going to be wild. Coco, did you have a question or something to add on this?
Yeah, I've got two questions actually. First thing is, will I be able as a rune holder to take a loan with the new lending and borrowing feature? And the second one is, I've noticed that mainstream people, high profile influencers, nobody even knows that swapping Bitcoin is actually an option through THORChain. So why won't we do some marketing or something just to spread the word out? I'm not talking about paid shilling for Rune to Moon, but just spreading the word. Is this an option?
Yeah. So first question was about can you use a Rune as collateral for a loan? And the answer to that question is no. And the reason why that is, I know that's very counterintuitive to a lot of people, but the reason why that is because the goal here, in some sense, is to pull in external capital into the network, right? So if me, Cow, and Thoreau were all kind of like hanging out with each other, we all had dollars in our hands, we just started passing dollars around between us all. It's not really, doing much. We're just, we're basically just circle jerking each other in some way, shape, or form. What we want is new exogenous capital, new outside the system to come in, right? To cause our little circle to become more valuable. You don't actually get a more valuable circle just by everybody just passing around amongst themselves. You need external capital come in. So if you were to do a Rune, loan, you would have to swap that Rune into a derived asset Rune, which we don't even have that pool for that, but just say we did. And you'd burn whatever Rune that is and out of the circulating supply, which that would be positive in terms of the effects on the theoretical price. But the amount of value that takes to the price is actually relatively small, right? Right now, the cap for lending is about, I think, 5 million Rune, or I guess technically speaking, it will eventually get extend to 7.5 million. And if you were to remove 7.5 million Rune from the circulating supply, which right now I think is like 300 or 320 or 320 million or whatever the hell the number is, that is very, much not significant in terms of its effect on the price, because you're only reducing the supply by, a couple percentage points. It's not really going to cause Rune to go to the moon in a manner of speaking. What does cause Rune to go to the moon is not so much just burning the Rune, but market buying Rune out of the market, right? So whenever somebody trades an exogenous asset, like Bitcoin, for example, they have to acquire the Rune out of the pool. So you buy up, let's just call it $10,000 worth of Rune out of the pools, which now an arbitrage bot has to replace the Rune that was removed from those pools and put it back into the pools. And now where are they going to get it from? The only reasonable place to get it right now, for the most part, at least the most liquid place to get it, is the Binance exchange, which has the vast majority of external trading of Rune outside of THORChain itself is on Binance. In which case, that order book is only about, last time I looked, I don't know what it is today, but last time I looked, it was about $200,000 in a 2% price change in either direction, right? So if you remove 2% of the circulating supply, you can theoretically improve the price by 2%, which is what 5% or 7% would more or less is. That's not 2% exactly, but whatever. But if you were to market buy 5 or 7 million Rune out of the order books, you're not going to push the price 2%. You're going to push the price far higher than that, because only $200,000 versus $10 million. Only $200,000 will push the price 2%. Whereas if you buy $10 million, it's obviously far more than 200,000. So the reason why we do it the way we do it is because we want to attract exogenous capital. We want the cap that we have, that's 5 or 7 million cap, to be focused on bringing Bitcoin into the market, bringing into our ecosystem, into our pools. We want Bitcoin to come in. We want Ethereum to come in. We want these assets to come in, because it provides a much greater value for not just the network, but also Rune holders.
Great, thank you. And what about my second question about marketing? I mean, it hurts my eyes. I see every now and then some high-profile crypto Twitter person doesn't know about where can you exchange a native Bitcoin to other native assets, and I'm like, it's insane. I mean, THORChain has been around for like 2 years, functioning. So what can we do about it?
Well, how I think about it is this. So we've never gone into marketing as a project. We never had a marketing budget. We never hired a marketing person. We actually experimented very early in 2019 about jumping on I think like a couple of the founders did an Ivan on Tech podcast, but that was like the one time we did something like that. And we just decided it wasn't really quite for us in a lot of ways. The way forward, I think, for THORChain is not to become a household name in a sense, and not to get everybody to be aware of THORChain in order to choose to swap on THORSwap specifically. THORSwap can run their own marketing if they want for their own product. The idea, I think, that I would like to see us shoot for is to get integrations, and so people like that guy we were talking about earlier today on the space today, who swapped via RocketX, and he didn't actually swap via THORChain in this particular case, but he might as well could have, and would have had no idea that he had swapped on it. I think that's really the way of getting it, is just trying to convince the wallets and the dexes and various partners to integrate, and then people start trading on their favorite dex, like whether it be a RocketX or whatever the hell it might be, and they think, hey, we're going to trade Bitcoin on RocketX because I love RocketX, and in reality, RocketX is not capable of actually trading Bitcoin and Ethereum, so it outsources its need for that functionality to us. That's probably the most effective way of doing it, rather than trying to convince everybody to be aware of THORChain and start trading it more directly.
Yeah, okay, got it. And what about the savers vaults? I mean, how can we scale them? What can be done about that? Like, $17 million in the Bitcoin pools is kind of huge. But I think that if people knew about it, it could be I don't know, 10x.
Yeah, and you think about where Savers Vaults are right now, we don't have a single integration with Savers Vault. It's only really THORChain native. You could do it on THORSwap or XDeFi. There's maybe a couple of very small integrations like Edge Wallet that have a THORChain Savers integration, but we don't have one. We don't have a trust wallet for Savers yet, and obviously that's something that we're working on, is getting bigger integrations, especially for obviously for swaps and for savers. So it kind of goes both ways. In we need to be where the users are and have this as a service that's offered by front ends, basically vetted with their seal of approval, saying like, hey, this is a service where you can earn on your assets. So that's definitely something that we're thinking on working on. And also just to elaborate on the marketing question a little bit, it's something that we're definitely thinking about and thinking about experimenting with. So when more things come out of that, we'll definitely have something to share, but nothing to share specifically on that front right now.
Okay, guys, thank you. Appreciate it.
By the way, on savers, if you look at the THORChain.net/store5/savers in your browser, in the last 24 hours, we've had an increase of 3.5 BTC into the BTC savers, for example. So it is climbing. It's a nice slow burn in a sense, very consistent, very slow, but nonetheless, growing. There's only so much space we actually have on the actual in the pools themselves. We don't have infinite space. This is why we're economically secure, because we don't just allow people to arbitrarily add as much capital as they want. I think as what Kyle was saying, as we kind of get more integration partners with like Trust Wallet or Edge Wallet that integrate into this particular feature of savers, that'll naturally create new demand for it, of course. But honestly, I think even if we didn't do that, I think we would probably, it would probably perform quite well on its own without that, to be honest. I think we already have. The fact that the Bitcoin savers is right now is like 80-something% full is pretty, without any kind of integrations or whatever, is pretty impressive. Although I think Shapeshift actually did integration for this. I'm not sure if they actually launched it yet or not, but I know they're working on it.
Yeah, they definitely launched it, but I'm talking about outside the THORChain ecosystem, especially ones that have large user bases and many millions of daily and monthly users. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, obviously the Shapeshift has a great integration, but any opportunity that we can have to move outside of the THORChain ecosystem and just be part of just the global space, whether that's in wallets or yield aggregators or things like that, that's the place where people are going to seek yield. Where it's right now, the people who are depositing to savers, they're people who are savvy to what is going on at THORChain. They obviously have trust in THORChain security and just a whole laundry list of things that like the average, like, quote unquote average person might not like know or understand. So yeah, it's just like it's a matter of time too, because people, in order to put your hard-earned Bitcoin into something like Savers, you definitely need trust in the fact that THORChain is a like robust and anti-fragile system that isn't gonna get hacked or go away, or you might lose your Bitcoin, right? Like that's obviously something that only time can really bring about in trust, right?
Or insurance.
And I think it's gonna take a lot of time. Yes, or insurance, but I don't think there's really been much conversation around like insurance lately. I think there has been some like here and there conversations, but no like real solid like service provider. And unless you know of one, do you know of a
Yeah,
good
I'm working at an insurance company
provider
that wants to integrate crypto insurance, but we're not decentralized. It's a very centralized entity,
Yeah, I don't. Is it possible to have a truly decentralized insurance company? It seems like there would always need to be some kind of like arbitrator in the middle.
Maybe Nexus, I don't know. But we are looking to integrate the Savers pools into our products.
Yeah, but that'd be great. Yeah. Insurance is actually kind of an interesting topic. It's something people talk about, and it makes sense to a certain extent. But it's actually hard to execute on. And we actually went through like a couple of years ago when we paused the chain for a couple of months to kind of reevaluate some things. We investigated the idea of like doing a protocol wide insurance. We talked to Nexus and a bunch of other providers, and it just wasn't mathematically feasible. It just didn't make any sense. The individual can do it for like relatively a smaller amount, but doing a protocol wide just didn't seem all that practical.
Yeah, I get it. And also, we kind of have better fees than crypto and Web3 companies because we're like 20 years of experience, and we've got hedging tools that doesn't exist in Web3. So we can offer like quite cheap insurance should we integrate. Our name is, by the way, Klepto Insurance. So if you guys want to look it up, do it.
Yeah, it's awesome. If you want to get in touch, then we can talk about this later. If you guys are trying to do an integration, then I would definitely DM Nine Realms or somebody on the team.
Cool. Thank you.
And we have Mr. Blec. Hey, Chris.
Oops. Hello.
Not sure if that was just me, but you were a little choppy there. Oh, I think you dropped. But
Yeah, I didn't hear much there either.
hopefully you can come back up and it'll work.
Yeah, he might need to rejoin.
Mike.
Try again.
Mic check.
There we go.
You got me?
I think so. You sound fine now. What's up, man?
Okay, I'm not sure what's wrong with me.
It sounds like you're quite delayed, but
oh shit.
Yeah, I think we can hear you clear now, but
let me
I'm getting the vibe that you're a few seconds behind.
Yeah, maybe you want to just like leave and then rejoin. Maybe this time Twitter won't rug you.
He's running through 17 different VPNs right now, so
That's incredible.
What's the name of that box? It's like the box that no like radio signals can go through, or you know what I'm saying?
Isolation chamber. You call it
there's a name for it.
Faraday.
Faraday.
Oh yeah, Faraday chamber. Yeah, Faraday cage.
Shout out to Michael Faraday right now. Smart dude.
I don't know too much other than I guess the Faraday cage is named after him.
Oh man, he was huge in the day. This is the 1800s in England. He made a lot of very significant discoveries. Faraday cage is just one of them, and it's not even one of his more significant ones, to be honest.
So what else did he do?
I'm trying to remember. I think he was in the 1800s, in the mid 1800s, if I remember correctly. You did a lot of work around temperature measuring, if I want to say that. The Faraday's cage itself was the discovery that you can be inside of a cage, and electricity that gets hit the cage, like you have like a lightning bolt hit the cage, electricity will stay on the outside of it rather than the inside. That's actually what the meaning of it is. It's not so much about radio waves and that kind of stuff. It's actually about electricity and how electricity passes through metal, and that if you're inside the metal, you won't get electrocuted. Even electricity stays on the outside. You can touch the actual the inside of the cage, and you will not be electrocuted. That's really what that particular thing was about. He also came up with the Faraday paradox and other things. It took him a long time to get into the Royal Society in London. He was very much like kind of, because he didn't come from royal blood, blah blah blah, or like prestige. People kind of shat on him a lot, but very brilliant dude.
All right, let's try the mic check again. Is it working now, Chris?
Yeah, it's not working. That's disappointing.
Yeah, not hearing you if you're speaking.
Disappointing in Twitter, I mean, not disappointing in Chris.
Oleg, what's up, dude?
Hey guys.
Anything new?
I just had a quick question for Chad. Meanwhile, I can't recall. I feel like I already asked you this question, but it's fuzzy in my mind. So, with respect to lending, you said the goal was to get like external capital into the ecosystem. I can't recall. Will this capital be used by the protocol actively to, like in the pools, in the sense that, say, we attract like 10 million more in Ethereum to the THORChain protocol with lending, will that then make the slippage for all the trades touching Ethereum, Ether, like cheaper?
Yeah, your question is, if we attract more exogenous capital into THORChain via lending, will it make the trades cheaper, like trading in general?
Yes, for the assets that we can bring on board in the protocol.
How do we answer this in a clear way? The answer to this is yes and no. I'll start with the no part, then I'll move on to the yes part. So when you do this, you're actually taking the inbound Ethereum and then you're swapping it. You're taking out Rune, and then that gets swapped into the derived asset, so forth and so on. All these things happen, and so that by itself is not actually changing the depth of the pool, which would cause the price to be cheaper, like the pool getting deeper itself. So that by itself doesn't actually accomplish that task. In fact, hypothetically, an arbitrage bot would just take in some Rune, put it back in the pool, take out the Ethereum they just put in a matter of speaking, and then carry on. And so in that sense, the answer would be no. But the reason why I'd say the answer is yes is because the act of an arbitrage bot going externally to find Rune and put it back into the pools inherently causes buy pressure into the Rune asset. And by creating inherent buy pressure on the Rune asset, you inherently cause an upward motion in terms of its price relative to the amount of Rune that was burnt out of the pool. And so if Rune's price increases, well, that means that the pools in general, not just the Ethereum pool for this particular trade that we're talking about, this particular loan we're talking about, but all of the pools, the Rune price would be, a higher value, right? So now even the Bitcoin pool, the value, the dollar value of the Rune versus the dollar value of the Bitcoin in that particular pool is now off balance. So now an arbitrage bot has to, put in more Bitcoin, take out some Rune for those pools, and so those pools inherently get a bit deeper because of it in some sense, and so. I think that the natural result over kind of a more kind of convoluted but way is that yes, I think it wouldn't actually cause the room price to increase, which would cause the depths to get deeper, which cause the prices to come down in terms of swap fees and such. I think it's a natural thing to happen, but I would not also say that that's a guaranteed thing to happen. I wouldn't say like every time somebody does a swap, fees get cheaper. I don't think it's that simple. I don't want to oversimplify a very complex thing, but generally speaking, I would say yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks. And just very quickly, let's say we have a successful lending launch. Would that then maybe we can expect higher LP fees for the gas assets that will be supported by lending temporarily?
Higher gas fees for lending? What do you mean by
LP
that?
fees, sorry. So for the liquidity providers, you said like there's going to be an initial swap for lending, and then the arbitrators are going to get the rune elsewhere and then put it back in the pool. So that's going to be just more trading for that pool. So like in the first, say, 3 to 4 to 6 weeks of the lending launch, is it fair to expect maybe slightly higher yield for the liquidity providers in the gas asset pools?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to guarantee anything or anything with this, but logically speaking, that's likely, just because as a dual side LP, you're more exposed to the rune price, and so by market buying and burning 5 or 7.5 million rune out of the pools, the rune price should naturally increase because of that, because you're buying lots of rune off the external markets. And so because you're kind of like exposed to the roof price as a dual side LP, you will have more experience, so the yield will be naturally higher for those people. For savers, they'll be less affected by this because they're only exposed to Bitcoin. And so if the roof price goes up, it doesn't really affect them directly all that much, although increased trading would be a natural result of that as well, just because the pools are getting deeper, not just in the ones you're opening loans on, but all of the pools would be affected by it just because of the price shift of the rune asset. But yeah, I think it would affect LPs and gain more yield, not only because of more trade volume, because loans are being opened and closed, which causes more trade volume and refreshing of loans, meaning that you have an open loan, you close it just to reopen it again. That's another thing that would naturally happen, causing more trade volume just organically, but also because the increased room price would naturally cause the yield to go up for dual side LPs, but not so much for savers.
Makes sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good question to ask.
All right, Chris, let's try this mic check one more time.
Still muted. Maybe that's the problem. Drop to listener.
Did you try turning it off and on?
Yeah, fucking Twitter, man. Fucking Twitter.
Did you try changing the logo back and forth? What the hell was up with that? Like, honestly. Like 3 days? 2 days?
I saw one theory that it was like supposed to go up for April Fools and then like just didn't get pushed in time or something. I don't know if that's valid, but maybe.
I thought it was because some sort of lawsuit or something like this about like something. I didn't really read it because I don't really care that much, but there's some sort of lawsuit that Elon's having, and he's just to thumb people in the eye. He changed the logo to a Doge icon.
Does anyone want to hear my THORChain April Fool's idea?
Let's hear
it.
AKA what we should have done
next year.
Yeah, there's always next year. All right, so here's the idea. All right, we delete the developer Discord. There's no more developer Discord. Instead, we set up THORChain.org, an anonymous dev image board, and we can communicate all on here just using pictures.
THORChain?
Just using Midjourney. You can only communicate via Midjourney.
I think the name alone is like a 10 out of 10 for me. That's where all the magic
the name
is.
came first. The idea flowed out of that.
Yeah, that'd be pretty sick. That'd be kind of hilarious.
Yeah, next year. I think it's actually pretty easy to just make your own like 4chan fork, basically. So yeah, next year, THORChain.org.
I'm surprised we don't have some sort of tweet on April Fool's, like, we're going centralized and we're going to remove all the validators and everything's going to be controlled by Lena, something like this.
KYC required.
KYC required. Must include blood sample.
I guess it's probably not a great idea because it'd probably actually affect the market. Maybe the joke should be a little lighter than that.
Maybe.
This is why Chad's not in charge.
No, I shouldn't be in charge of much, to be honest with you. It would be funny though.
Yeah, good idea, Chad. Let's just say, oh yeah, there's an exploit or something like that. It's on April Fool's Day. Yeah, good idea, Chad.
I'm just gonna do it next April Fool's. I'm just gonna like put out like 15 tweets in a single day that are like just all the worst things I could possibly say, just to trigger people, just to piss people off and get all like the naysayers like, hey, I told you THORChain was centralized. Look at this guy tweeting about how whatever, just to be a dick.
Yeah, April Fool's is admissible in court, by the way. It's that's a totally valid legal defense.
Is it really? I didn't know that.
Fuck no, dude.
I thought that you were serious. I never heard about that. Hey man, April Fool's is over. That was like a week ago. You April Fool's me today. Mr. Blec, how are you?
Oh, let's see. You there, Chris?
Oh, it's muted, but no words are coming out.
I hear absolutely nothing. The phone, update the
Yeah.
Twitter app. I have no idea. Chris, sorry for all the troubles, my friend, but it ain't working very well.
That's quite annoying.
Anyway, we can move to Discord, maybe?
Yeah, okay. I guess we could move to a Discord, but that's kind of impromptu, and I'm not sure if anybody would actually show up. But I mean, the reason why I actually wanted to have Chris on today was because he had a really good tweet the other day, which maybe we should like link it in the thing here somewhere. But where he kind of has this idea in his head about like the North Star of DeFi and how kind of a series of questions you can ask to understand the centralization risk or the risk in general of a particular DeFi protocol. And the idea that he has, I think, is a good one. I think the questions that he asks are good questions to ask. And I wish we did this more actively with more projects. And that's one of the things I like about Chris and what he does on his show or podcast, whatever you want to call it, is that he asks these questions and he likes to kind of give projects a hard time about their implementation and design, which is, I think that's very much needed in the industry in general. I would actually I'd like to get more hard questions personally. Like I've done a lot of interviews and podcasts myself over the years, and I'd like to get more difficult or more hard questions than I typically get, just because I'm very proud of the design that we've come up with as a community, and very proud of how we've implemented things. Not everything's going to be perfect, of course, because one can never achieve perfection, but I think we've made very good decisions over the years, and I'm quite happy and proud with those. I'm happy to defend them, even against the most urgent, extreme individuals. But I would love to have a conversation with Chris about this stuff, because it's very good serious questions. But it doesn't seem like it's going to be happening today, unfortunately.
Yeah, hopefully we can figure out another time or place to do it. But you were on his podcast. That was way back, like over maybe like 2 years ago or something. But that's still probably a great episode to go back and people could listen to it and kind of like just learn some of the inner workings of the original THORChain design. But yeah, I love Chris's thinking, and like I guess some people think he's too hard on projects and stuff like that. But I think we need more Chris's to try to poke holes. And like you said, like when you get asked the hard questions, that's where like the real shit comes out, and you really have to figure out these like edge scenarios and make these systems as resilient as possible. So Yeah, I really respect and love to follow Chris. So hopefully we can make it happen.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, maybe we could just go through some of the points a little bit, just so this isn't just a total flop. But like, I pinned the tweet to the top up here, so we can talk about this DeFi North Star metric, basically, which is the different values of a DeFi protocol. Obviously, something that like THORChain is very well entwined with, and something that we think about, and all the contributors think about in like how to make this protocol like truly decentralized and immutable, and a core part of DeFi and just this new open financial network. So the first principle obviously being trustless. So situations where trust in the core team is involved, trying to avoid those, including a variety of things like an admin key, changeable oracles, off-chain transactions, funds custody, token governance, oligarchies, balance slashing, etc.
Yeah, that's actually one of the biggest problems in the DeFi, like especially in the Ethereum world, the smart contracting world, is the ability that the devs have to update the contract, because it's called a proxy contract, because as everybody knows, when you deploy a smart contract on Ethereum, it's immutable. And so in order to have code that you can change, you create another contract in front of it that just proxies to another contract. So you deploy a new contract, and then you update the proxy contract, the new configuration that points to the new contract you deploy. And so you can do this in a way that allows devs to make code changes and such. For the most part, almost everybody uses contracts. I think Uniswap's one of the very few people that don't use it, and I commend them for that, although it also comes at a cost of like, well, if there's some sort of bug or exploit, you're pretty much fucking screwed because there's nothing you can do about it. But the problem comes in like how it allows the devs to make code changes, right, without any kind of governance necessarily, depending upon how the proxy contract is implemented. And we've seen this actually recently with what was it called? Not Mega Markets. It was called Oasis Protocol. They rugged like I think it was $150 million worth of assets from one of their LPs, which was the person that attacked Wormhole Exchange about a year and a half or 2 years over 2 years ago, I guess now. And they made a software change. They pushed it out that allowed them to rip out one of their liquidity providers' funds and rug them. And that's obviously like that should set alarms off in people's minds in that sense. So like the ability that an admin key has to like force a software update is inherently highly problematic, and we see this very, very commonly in the Ethereum DeFi space. We see it almost everywhere. There are ways you can do it that's a little better. Like for example, you could like update your proxy contract, but the effect doesn't actually take place until like 2 weeks from now. So at least if you are forcing an update of your software upon everybody else, at least that gives people a 2-week window. They can withdraw themselves or withdraw their liquidity or whatever they want to do. It's at least better than nothing. And that's one of the things that I like about THORChain in this case, and because it's a layer one. I myself or anybody else for that matter has no ability to force software updates onto our own community. Everything has to be adopted through governance, and that's each individual validator has to make the choice to update to version 2.0, whatever the hell it is, and 100% of all the validators have to upgrade to that thing in order to adopt that thing. And so that requires that is governance in a sense. That's every one of our important validators doing their job. That's a big component. It's something we see almost every DeFi project. Well, very, very few of them don't pass even that simple litmus test.
In his comments, I'm just curious to ask, kind of from his perspective, is like somebody was saying, why is THORChain not on your list? He posted like a short list of what he would consider to kind of like pass all these criteria. And Chris replied that THORChain requires trust in the node operators. So I'm curious, like, what you think he was getting at there, and how would you kind of break that down?
I can see where he's coming from, I think, at least. whenever you have a layer one, and it doesn't really matter if it's a proof of work or proof of stake, you have to have trust in the people that run that, the miners or the validators. Like they're the ones that are actually doing it in the end, right? And those individuals, whomever they are, always have the ability to change the software, right, underneath you. Like you don't, as a person who holds Room, you don't have the ability to freeze the chain from upgrading to a new version or changing the behavior in any stretch or form. And that's true within within Bitcoin as well. If you hold Bitcoin, you have no control over like what gets adopted, what doesn't get adopted. What gives you power is how much mining power, how much hash rate you have. And he'd be correct to say, and I'm sure if he's on here, he would say he'd be correct to say that Bitcoin is more decentralized than THORChain is, and I think that's reasonably a fair statement considering the number of miners that exist. The total capacity of hash rate in the Bitcoin network is probably much more secure than THORChain by a good mile, and I would totally agree with him. That's a fair statement to be made. In the end, you do have to trust that the validators aren't going to make a change that is against your best interest as a holder of the asset. Now, your viewpoints are aligned because obviously validators are holding the Rune asset and you're holding the Rune asset, and so your incentives are pointing in the same direction. Neither one of you want to see Rune go to zero, and both of you want to see Rune go to the metaphorical moon. And so that is the concern. But that concern also exists even in proof of work networks, because, for example, even your most ardent Bitcoin maxi will tell you to not use time lock contracts, right? And time lock contract is something you can do on Bitcoin, where you can say, I'm going to put some Bitcoin into this wallet, and I'm going to lock the wallet so it can't move the Bitcoin at all, no matter what, for 10 years. And in the earlier days of Bitcoin, people were using this as a methodology to like give Bitcoin to their kids or grandkids or something like this and gift it to them in a way that they couldn't move the funds for 10 or 20, 30, arbitrarily, however long you want to set it to, 10 or 20 years. And so they can sell the Bitcoin too early and they get it when they're 25 rather than when they're 5 or something like this. And the reason why even Bitcoin maxis will see to not utilize that feature is because if Bitcoin chooses to make a change that you do not like, or if Bitcoin says we're going to change how time lock works and time lock contracts work, and we're going to say that we add some new restraint on it or something like this. Well, no matter what it is, you can't move because your Bitcoin is being locked in a particular wallet. And so even you're setting yourself, you're locking your capital away, then you can't actually have control of it. Therefore, you're just basically at the behest of the miners to make whatever changes they want to the network without you being able to do anything about it. And that's a bad idea in general, right? To be locked something up for like extended periods of time like that. If you lock something for like a week or two, that's obviously fine. But if you do something for like 10 years, that's obviously much different. So I think he's right when he's saying about like you have to trust the validators of this, and that's true and that's fair. But you also have to trust the miners of Bitcoin to not make choices against your interests as well. Ethereum is a little more complicated because you're running your own kind of system and your own kind of rules that you're kind of managing yourself because you're running your own smart contract. But it is an interesting conversation. One I wanted to get into the details with Chris about.
Yeah, so obviously we had that whole remember that conversation with Togrul back in I want to say November or December where we kind of argued about trust for probably about like an hour, just the definition of it and how you could say something is trustless or not, and like I guess it all kind of comes down to just I don't even want to get into it honestly, but
the important thing from that whole conversation was that like in the end there's nothing that is actually trustless. The idea that anything is actually trustless, meaning that there's absolute zero trust, is nonsensical. And I don't care if we're talking about Bitcoin or Ethereum or THORChain or whatever. Like nothing in the world is actually fucking trustless. And so we use this term. It's a little bit like hyperbolic in some sense or a little bit misused, but an exaggerated term at best. But nothing in the world is actually trustless. So when he says that you have to trust the validators, he's right. And to say that we also have to trust the miners of Bitcoin, that's also right. You could also make a very practical argument that we have to trust the validators of THORChain more than trust the miners of Bitcoin. And that's true in some sense because the number of people required to make a change for THORChain versus Bitcoin is a very different number. So the amount of trust for Bitcoin is far less than it is for a proof of stake network like THORChain, or any proof of stake network for that matter. That's just a natural thing to happen when you have a proof of stake network. But like at the same time, like we can't actually use proof of work. Like if you wanted to rebuild THORChain, get rid of the proof of stake, replace it with proof of work, it's impractical for us to do that because we need instant finality in order to be able to do trades or swaps. If we can just like undo the last 5 blocks of THORChain, right, because of a reorg or something like this, well then now you're insolvent. Now you've just lost a bunch of money. Now people got trades they shouldn't have got. Now people withdraw when they shouldn't have been able to withdraw, or something of this nature. And like it would become a pretty significant disaster if you ask me. Or if you wanted to, you could say, you know what, we're just going to wait 5 blocks before we actually do anything. Okay, now you don't have to deal with reorgs as much. But now you've made trading and swapping so fucking slow because you have to wait for many blocks of a hash rate that's probably going to be pretty small in the beginning because hash rates are always small in the beginning. Like it would just be completely impractical technologically to implement something like a THORChain where you have to like make changes on other changes, make changes on other chains. Completely impractical to do that with proof of work. So you have to do with something with instant finality, which is what proof of stake is. And so like with that, excuse me, with that comes a different set of requirements.
Yeah, for sure. And looking at the other like points of this DeFi North Star, like open source, transparent, permissionless, censorship resistant user sovereignty, those are all things that are, I think, pretty obvious in seeing how they fit into how THORChain operates. And the one that is like the biggest question in people's minds is like the trustlessness. Can you trust THORChain validators? And obviously, like every effort has been made to make sure that THORChain validators have the right incentives to actually operate the network. Obviously, being that it's a necessity of THORChain that they're always over collateralizing what they're securing in the vaults to maintain that economic security, which is at the end of the day the base layer of THORChain. And actually, this kind of ties into that CZ tweet from the other day, where he was talking about. It was a tweet about Uniswap v3, and let me see if I can pull this up. But talking about Uniswap v3 and just basically saying like with these DeFi protocols, it's all about ensuring finality, ensuring that validators will process transactions and they won't steal from the network. And THORChain's design is the only one that always ensures that there is economic security and not a trusted relationship between the validators that secure the vaults of the native assets, so the ones that are actually have the TSS keys to the Bitcoin. Then it needs 16 out of 20 validators in order to sign out any funds from the network. So THORChain is the only one that guarantees that economic security, that the validators are always bonding more than they're securing. And to my knowledge, it's the only cross-chain network that has a guarantee about economic security of the funds.
Yeah, and that's an important question to ask. We talk about trustlessness. What are the incentives at play, right, to get people to act in accordance in the best interest of the network itself, right? And so if you take a Bitcoin, for example, if you had an ability, if you actually had enough hash rate that you could 51% attack Bitcoin, just imagine you had it in your back pocket or whatever, would you actually do it? Or would you just mine Bitcoin and make a bunch of money from the mining of it? Or would you try to double spend in some sort of transaction and like, reveal that you have 51% and all this kind of stuff and probably make Bitcoin go to, drop 90% in value in a matter of a couple of days? Or would you just sit there and fucking mine it and stuff? And so like the incentive is part of the trustlessness is like when can somebody act in accordance with the network and when can they act in accordance against the network? And where does the incentives actually lie? Does it push them towards the incentives of the network, or does it push them towards the incentive of stealing or against the network? In the case of like another cross-chain DEX that secures exogenous capital, all of them are incentivized to go against the network, right? Because it's more profitable to go against the network than it is to go with the network. In Bitcoin's case, it's more profitable to be with the network, even if you had 51% attack. It's more profitable to go with the network. And in THORChain's case, it's more profitable to go with the network than it is to go against it, right? If you actually had enough of the validators of THORChain to be able to rug some funds or whatever. It always goes along with the network. So it's not so much like we're trusting people in the way thing we trust people to altruistically, behave in a certain kind of way, like we do in some services, like the Liquid network, for example, the Trusted Federation or Rootstock, these kind of things. It's actually just it's ensuring that people behave in the correct way because they're financially incentivized to do so, not because we ask them to.
Yep, for sure. Let me just go through this conversation real quick, because I think it's pretty interesting back and forth, and one that really only THORChain has solved this problem of economic security, and just maintaining that validators need to follow the rules because they have, sort of Damocles hanging over their head. So, all right, the exchange goes like this. CZ says, we need more DEXs. Pancake has most of the users. Uni has most of the TVL, and it's still too centralized. I know. Imagine that coming from me. We need more options. And someone says, what about making Binance a hybrid exchange, self-custodial like DEX is, with the performance and liquidity of a centralized venues like Binance? Aside, I wonder what service could offer something like that, some non-custodial version of Binance. Very interesting concept. Anyway, he goes on to say, easier said than done. Have to ensure fund security too. Make sure that the counterparty of the trade gets paid and no one can scam the system, i.e. real-time settlements. Blockchain throughput is just not there yet. So what do you think about that whole statement and like where THORChain fits into that?
Yeah, I mean, he's right in some of the things he's saying. Like, for example, like blockchain throughput is just not there yet. Like, he's thinking from the mindset of a centralized exchange where you have high frequency traders, doing many trades per second or something like this, and which Binance is maybe is their bread and butter in some sense. And he's right in the sense you really can't do high frequency throughput trading on a blockchain. You can kind of do it on THORChain somewhat if you stay within synthetics. You can do some pretty good throughput, but still not nearly to the degree, to the quantity that you can do on a centralized exchange. He's right in that sense, in that way. I would agree with him, but he's also right saying that that's really hard to ensure security as well. That's why nobody else has accomplished it with the exception of us.
Yeah, well said, Chad. Sweet. Well, anything else you guys want to talk about today, and anything else that's on top of mind?
Not immediately, but people are welcome to hit the request button and come up if they have questions about anything.
I see I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, so I'm gonna butcher it, but Steffi? Steffi?
Yeah, he's in the crowd.
Yeah.
I don't know if he wants to pop in, but it's good to see him in here.
Yeah, and Can's in it too. I'm always a big fan of Can. He's a smart dude. One of the Delphi guys.
Yeah, we got a good crowd.
Yes. Let's get Juggernaut up here first. You got a question? What's up, man?
Hey, go guys. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Just a short question that tortured me back because as everyone's saying, there's a lot of question about what if a state attack Bitcoin with a 51 attack. Do you believe this possible? I got the market cap there. It's 500,000 million of dollars. Which state will try to attack this? Well, we know that miners now are all farms, and farms can aggregate. Okay, but do you think that's possible with this market cap? It's for everyone, the question.
Is it possible that a state could 51% attack Bitcoin? I think that's basically your question. I know it's a hard thing to say. I think the biggest problem, to be honest with you, like take a country like the United States, who has obviously gobs of money, in a sense, and will print it to however they want it to. But part of the problem is actually not just the monetary requirements of actually buying enough hardware to be able to do this, is also being able to acquire the hardware itself. Like it took 10 plus years of mining building companies that they've produced over the last 13 plus years of ant miners and whatnot, different types of miners over the years. Like you're basically going to pin all of that hardware across whatever new hardware that the United States purchases and sets up in some rig somewhere in Texas probably. And that would be very hard to do, right? Like it's not impractical, but it would be extremely hard just to be able to acquire enough like raw materials to be able to produce enough hardware to be able to have enough hash rate to outperform, all of the current hash rate today combined of every piece of mining hardware that has ever been produced, bought, and is being used today. And of course, the old hardware that used like 3 years ago, nobody uses at all because it's just so weak. So you have to constantly be buying, new hardware to stay competitive. In which case, I mean, it's possible, but it'd be very, very difficult. It'd be more effective to like try to convince miners today who are already, mining Bitcoin and try to pay them off because they already have the hardware readily available and it's already set up and being used and that kind of stuff. It would be extremely difficult. I don't think it'd be all that practical, and it would cost an absorbent amount of time and energy to do so. I just don't see it happening, to be honest.
Okay, thank you for your answer. It's reassuring. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. Yo, Sephi, what's up, dude?
Oh, not too much. Hopefully you guys are having a good day. Just on lunch break a bit. Came in a little late, so not sure what all the controversies today are. But I don't know. I don't know that there's an obvious incentive to attack the Bitcoin network. It's still relatively small in terms of market cap, and the market cap is maybe it's not even at some of the biggest companies in the world yet. But like, what would be the purpose of doing so? Because if the thing fails, ultimately, for some reason, whatever, quantum computing, you name it, then it fails. Like, but whose money would be involved with like taking on this attack? And like, you're going to bury all that money and throw it away for what exactly? So like, let's say you bought all these miners and somehow took over the network. Now what? What are you going to do with it?
Shut it down to protect people, of course.
And that's what Elizabeth Warren would probably tell you, right? She wants to, launch an attack against Bitcoin to sink it to zero. So that,
yeah, but like when you listen to her speak, like there's very little evidence she understands money at all. I think she's an idiot. So I really don't think she has any clue what she's talking about anything.
Whether she's an idiot or not, or has a clue if she's understanding that, is kind of doesn't really matter in the context of is it feasible or possible, or would there be interest? People can be moronic but still have an interest in doing something, right?
Yeah, to me, it's like it's much more obvious for the government to spin up a sort of like centralized system with a lot greater ease than it is to mess with the Bitcoin network, because they already have the dollar effect, right? So like, all you'd need to do is like put together, let's say, 1,000 different computers floating around the United States, all centralized, meaning like owned by the government or whatever. It's gonna be fairly resistant to DDoS attacks and whatever else. And like, you could pretty much achieve a fairly strong network if you want to go to like the CBDC route or whatever it is you want to do. Now that's barring all the obvious like bad reasons to build CBDCs, but that's the other problem with a lot of these folks that are building these systems, or like their wish list is, I think they just really don't have a good imagination for how tyrannical this all can get. When you hear most of the folks speak about this sort of thing, I think it's like they're not using their imagination of how it just backfires quite badly upon themselves, to where like the political class, even if you thought you were in control of something, like the system with a CBDC based setup, like is an optimizer and essentially like moves to controlling you. It just always, like every sort of like permutation of how you think of this always ends in some catastrophic disaster for human beings in a sense. So, and you know, like Bitcoin itself is not perfect in some ways. Like there are problems. So like for it to take over all the world's money or something like that, it's got some obvious issues with privacy. It's got, and those issues with privacy make it concerning for things like, you know, corporations and their treasuries and such. It's not like there hasn't been a simple solution for that. Some level of centralization ultimately is necessary for some like KYCable privacy in a sense, and like it's there's almost no getting around it. I think mathematically, like nobody's been able to figure out a way to do it so far. I don't know. Maybe Chad, you've had some idea. Like with THORChain, you know, you've got you know, the option to exchange between things that provide privacy versus things like Bitcoin that is more just you know, provides that scarcity function but not necessarily privacy. Like, but what do you guys think about, like, you know, what does the ecosystem of coins look like to make the world work on crypto? Have you guys thought about that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting conversation. I remember I was talking to Zooko, who was the guy behind. He's one of the OG Bitcoiners, and he's the guy behind Zcash. And one of the reasons why he decided to, like, so fascinating side story, but relating, that Satoshi himself actually talked about $0 proofs before he left. I think it was about 3 months before he kind of like went ghosted. And he talked about actually implementing within Bitcoin itself, and he actually agreed that it should be done at some point. But the problem at the time was that there wasn't, that the development of the ZK knowledge proofs was quite primitive and wasn't really practical in Bitcoin at that point in time. Fast forward, I think it was about a year and a half later, or whatever the hell the number was, and there's a breakthrough, and some professors at MIT had a breakthrough on ZK knowledge. And they went to these professors actually went to the Bitcoin conference. I think it was in St. Louis at the time, if I'm not mistaken. And they were like, "Hey, you know, let's do what Satoshi talked about, you know, a year ago or how it was, and let's put zero knowledge proofs into Bitcoin." And the devs at the time, because the conference was small, like there's only like 30 or 40 people at this early on in Bitcoin's history at that Bitcoin conference, but the devs basically said, like, "No, we're not going to do this. Like, maybe some, you know, altcoin can do it or something like this. Like, somebody else can experiment with it. We're not going to put it into the core protocol of Bitcoin." And so then the professors actually went to Zooko, because Zuko's been around in digital, assets since like the 1990s. Like, he's been around for fucking ever, like way before Bitcoin even existed. And they asked him if he'd be willing to do it, and Zuoko said, "No, I don't want to do that." Like, he actually literally turned down what would eventually become the idea of Zcash, and he turned it down, the idea, but then he did a 180 once he realized to himself that, like, people are going to want to have their privacy and be able to, like, you know, buy things or get paid from their company or like whatever it is that's being happening, to do that privately. If you have to do that in a public ledger, then like just, it will not be a non-functional unit of exchange, right? It just won't function correctly. That's why he created Zcash. And this is kind of pulling on what you're saying about, like, Bitcoin's not particularly great at privacy. You know, it technically has it. Taproot with store signatures with, you know, mixing wallets, like that gives you some level of privacy. You can argue all day about what the level is between the level 1 and a level 10 and compare it against other systems like Monero or Tornado Cash. But the point is that different systems will have different values and attributes that they put forward. And Bitcoin will probably never become, just because I don't see a push for it within the community today, the Bitcoin community, to become a privacy first kind of mentality. I think they'll always just be like anonymity first. And if that's the case, then they will never have, you know, strong privacy, probably. But I could be wrong. I'm not an expert of the future, but it's a inevitable thing that different assets and different chains, different ecosystems will just have a different set of attributes that are very useful in this situation, but not so useful in that situation. And a natural thing to occur is being able to move between these different assets and utilizing the power and functionality of any given asset for the times and the situations and scenarios where it makes sense to use that thing. Bitcoins can be very, very useful in some scenarios and not going to be very useful in other scenarios. So sometimes we're going to need privacy, which is not Bitcoin. Sometimes we want a very strong store of value, which is what Bitcoin is, so forth and so on.
Yeah, it's like I've not seen so far a solution that would work for, say, I don't know, my corporation, for example. There's not like, and until that solution exists, it's hard to assume that like a lot of corporations are going to care about adopting any one standard for this purpose. So I think it's a mixture of like, one, obviously a significant amount of adoption has to happen in order to make it worthwhile to even bother, because your customers have to have this thing, and if they have it, they might buy your products. But on the other hand, you have the flip side problem of like, corporations particularly need things like privacy, and nobody wants to give away all the secrets to how much revenue they're making or whatever it is. So like the transparency is kind of a double-edged sword in a sense, and the whole point of like having a corporation to some extent is like having a group that has secrets to a large extent, and that you can use that alpha or that innovation to then like one up your other competitors, and like really open money makes that hard to do. So it's a problem.
Yeah, but not only just corporate, but like imagine a hypothetical scenario where I'm buying an air fryer on Amazon, and I can pay in Bitcoin, for example. And I pay Bitcoin. They ship the air fryer to my house at 157, Oslo Lane. I don't know what the hell it is. And now they have it in their database on Amazon of what my address is, what my name is, and how much Bitcoin I have in my wallet, which I'll just imagine for the sake of discussion is 1,000 BTC. Now all that data is there on Amazon servers, and what are they going to do with that? Well, they could actually sell that. That could be valuable information, right, for some people. It could be exploited, like one of the employees of Amazon or somebody breaks into Amazon, a hacker of some kind, extracts the Bitcoin addresses and the physical addresses of where people live. Okay, this guy's got 1,000 BTC, this guy's got 500 BTC, and this guy's got this over here. I'm going to go ahead and break into their houses and be an asshole. It's just like using open ledgers for just general commerce doesn't make logical sense to me personally. Using it for store of value, that makes sense. I can get behind that.
Yeah, the attack vectors are interesting. Like this is sort of why most of us have delegated to store of value status and are not really that interested in like opening our wallet to go buy a Big Mac at McDonald's or whatever. Just like there's no practical reason to do that at this point.
Yeah, maybe that'll change in the future.
There's the other thing of remittances too. There's a reason why Visa, MasterCard, and whatever do what they do. Sometimes you don't get your air fryer, or maybe you get your air fryer and it's broken and you want your Bitcoin back. There's all sorts of problems without having a middleman. You wind up with problems that a smart contract may not fully be able to solve. Such as like you being happy with your air fryer, so like, and then there's other components to that too. It's like if you, like just refunds and all of the kind of elements that go into that. It's kind of like why
you would need
it's kind of why you have an entire layer for that purpose, right?
Yeah, you would need some legislation that would require businesses to operate with the ability to do refunds and so forth and so on, which I'm not even sure that's even already true today or not. But if I buy an air fryer and I receive it, I buy with some Bitcoin, I receive it, if the whole thing's broken to begin with, and I return it, I should get my Bitcoin back, and there should be some sort of law that ensures that.
What do you think about the idea that like digital money is more than anything useful for digital goods and services as opposed to necessarily real world ones? There hasn't been a very, very strong push in the so-called Web3 space to ultimately turn all of like the digital assets into something you'd pay for with just digital assets. And the digital world, maybe when it gets bigger, maybe we'll be singing a different tune. Like, let's say 100 years from now, and more of the things we care about are actually digital products, not physical ones. Maybe there's a room for like the crypto economy to be the native economy at that point, but maybe within the country of digital space, as opposed to like trying to convert that to physical goods and services. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, this is actually kind of something that it's one of my probably more extreme viewpoints is that um, like the quote unquote metaverse, and I personally fucking hate this term to be honest with you, but just the digital universe that we live in will eventually become its own country, no matter speaking, or maybe thousands of countries depending on how it's structured. But like we'll have citizenship in the United States of America, but also quote unquote citizenship. And I don't mean that in a literal sense of like an issued document and that kind of shit, but just like the idea that you are a part of another sovereign state of some kind that exists purely digitally. That's a kind of the more of extreme idea that may happen, maybe not next year, but maybe in 20 years, 15, 20 years, that might happen.
Yep, we have like pretty strange times coming. Like just all the AI tools and revolution that's happening there. I see a lot of those services being potentially paid for digitally, just because it makes sense. Like if you think about like cognition as a capability that's very, very like digital in this sense. You have, let's say you're paying for your little, AI behavioral therapist, right? Like it makes sense to stay within the digital realm for that. Maybe you pay for it with that, and then let's say there's AIs out there that want to hire you for doing shit like in the real world, and they're going to pay you with digital money. That becomes really, really interesting.
Absolutely.
I have this theory that like the AI agents may actually reach a point where they're actually larger consumers on this planet than actual humans. That could be really weird. Like they're competitors to us as actual consumers, and that it would make sense that they would use digital money, because why would they need physical anything except to buy to make Chad go and build another server. Like it pays you in Bitcoin or something.
They definitely would consume more data than we do, right? They would consume vast quantities more than we would.
What about with like potentially private stable coins? Do you guys feel like that would solve the real world stuff as far as like your personal privacy and revealing your balances and such like that? Like if you in the future, and this was kind of like where Terra was going for a while, right? It's like if you could, borrow against your Bitcoin and have that converted to a private stable coin that you could then like pay for all your real world day-to-day stuff with, like what would be the reservation for that? If you could just stay fully crypto.
Biggest problem is going to be their paranoia about who actually is the arbiter of truth, and who ultimately do they KYC with. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, it's like, I know people like to blast government for everything, but you have a democracy or representative government or for a reason. It's so that you at least have some semblance of human beings being able to sort of control their own destiny. Nobody's arguing that any government's perfect or doesn't have centralization or tyranny issues or whatever. That's, those kind of things are obvious. But you, like, let's say, for example, like, we all become more trusting of AI agents as an example. And we're like, hey, you know what? Like governments can't be trusted. People can't be trusted. Let's trust this thing over here. It's going to control my CBDC, and it's going to decide, like, it's going to contain the information, like my privacy information, whatever. And that way, if like the police, the FBI or whoever wants to sort of figure out where my money went or what I used it for, then they would ask the AI, show them the credentials and whatever. You could do all that, but then what ends up happening is like you wind up with a backlash of people that are going to say, wait a minute, like this thing's not human. We need to go back to humans controlling this. And who's the default situation that can do that is ultimately the government, because corporations are going to be like quasi AI services too at some point. So it's like it's a weird thing that like you ultimately end up with a governance problem, and no matter how you go about this, you wind up back at square one to some extent. Like the founders of the constitutional founders all like, worried about these exact same things, and this is hundreds of years ago. And you always wind up with the same exact circular logic. It's almost like it's cyclical. You can decentralize things to some extent, but then like people tend to want that some sort of human representation at some level, and then once you do that, you have to trust somebody, right? So it's an interesting process. But like to me, it's like if I'm going to own a CBDC type of object, or like a stable coin generally. In general, it's got to be like fully decentralized, or to me, it's got to be fully government. There's not a lot of in between, to me. Like why would you add one more layer or vector of risk in between, right? Like owning Circle, USDC. How does that help me exactly? You see the problem? Like either all year. Like to me, it's like either I have a crypto that's fully sufficiently decentralized enough, or I have a US dollar. Or maybe I have gold or some other store of value, but like there's not a lot of in betweens where I want a CBDC. A privately owned stable coin, which somehow reduces the risks. Like it's reducing what risk? You're adding corporate risk and all sorts of other stuff in between. I
don't think it's good for holding, but it could be good as like a temporary medium of exchange, right? Like if you're fully crypto native and you're like just like that example of taking a loan against your Bitcoin or something, using that for commerce, and then like the business accepts that and quickly converts it to whatever they're comfortable holding.
I'm with you completely.
It's kind of
I want to use I totally want to be able to use a stable coin. I get it. I think the deeper question is like, how big are you going to allow that to get before you yourself are going to be worried? Hey, wait a minute, like let's say the Circle Corporation 100 years from now, like let's just say, for example, is dealing with like 30% of the people's money or something. I don't just make up some number. How big is too big to fail, or too big where it's like, wait, what kind of nefarious things could this company possibly do to our lives? Like you see the problem. So it's like there's no, and then you could have like millions of stable coins, right? Like you have lots of different ones, but then that's a different set of problems. Without a certain scale, you don't get safety either. So it's like and then the one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin folks essentially say, well, if it became all the world's money, right, you wouldn't be having this discussion because everything would be denominated in that. That's the end of it. And that's a possible future, I suppose. But, we'll see what happens. But in between, it's like people like their stables, right? Like, and we like DeFi to have stables in it because like it's really tough otherwise. But it always goes back to this trust problem. I mean, look what happened with like Circle's DPEG. You're like, shit, like, that wrecked a lot of DeFi holders somewhere, right? Like there's got to be people in protocols that lost money as a result of that DPEG.
Yeah, I think some DeFi protocols even hard-coded USDC to be $1 in the actual code base, which was terrible idea. I actually like to drop some kind of crazy conspiracy theory alpha at people here. But I think inevitably the best stable coin out there is going to be Bitcoin, just because stability of an asset, generally speaking, is very much correlated to the market cap of that asset. And the larger the market cap, the more stable the asset just naturally tends to be, because it takes a lot more economic pressure to change the price either up or down. And so like I think like once Bitcoin's market cap is, and I think eventually it'll get there to be like 100 trillion, something like this, which would be bigger than the US dollar at that point. Or just the higher it gets, it becomes inherently more and more stable. And then at that point, like at some point, Bitcoin will likely become more stable as an asset than the dollar is. I think if you agree with me that the market cap of Bitcoin will continue to increase and one day surpass the market cap of the US dollar. And if anybody out there who believes that the US dollar is going to zero, which there are some people who believe that, then you probably agree with me on this. I'm sure you do. But like, I think that's probably the inevitable result. We think about stablecoins now because Bitcoin is, relatively speaking, very volatile. But I don't think that's going to be true in like 15 years or 20 years. I mean, that Bitcoin will become the stable coin itself rather than something else trying to be stable.
Chad, when you go to like Bitcoin meetings or whatever, how much talk has been out there as far as like changing the hashing algorithm at some point? Like the actual compression, I'm sorry, like the actual cryptographic mechanism. the reason I say that's because like if we're waiting for like BTC to become like a certain size, and assuming we have like a trajectory that doesn't flatten out and really continues to grow, let's assume we're talking about like 15, 20 years time frame. The doubling time of like qubits on quantum computers, I think, IBM Osprey is sitting around 400 plus. The doubling time is increasing and the error correction technology is increasing quite quickly. So in that doubling time, you could get to the 10 million plus qubits, maybe. And then that's not including even like various AI elements in creating some of the circuitry and everything. Like, it's interesting how aggressively optimizing those systems are. So let's assume like we had quantum computing platforms that, can actually affect Bitcoin in, let's say, 15 years, to make up a number. Have there been some like moves to sort of like preempt any of this with various quantum resistant algorithms? Because that has a big role in the hardware too, obviously, because the hardware of the network would have to be optimized, not just the software. So
I mean, that's been talked on and off within the Bitcoin community for quite many years. I've listened to a few conversations throughout many years. Right now, my general feeling sense that I get from people when I talk to people, and this is just my own subjective understanding and objective reality, but is that for most people, like, they don't really consider quantum computers to be a much of a risk to Bitcoin. Theoretically, mathematically, it is in the long term, but nobody sees that risk quite yet. Now, the idea is like, how are we going to change things in 15, 20 years when quantum computers become cheaper to manufacture and get past, you mentioned error codes and that kind of shit that happens. And also like being able to not have to cool quantum computers to be like near zero fucking temperature, Kelvin, near zero Kelvin to function and operate. Like, there's a bunch of technological things that need to be kind of broken through, and arguably some of these things aren't even possible to be broken, but we never know until we actually try. Sorry, my earbud just died. It is possible to do so, and I can even go into the mathematics of like how the hashing actually functions and works, and how the difficulty is calculated. Like, all these things, we can get into the nitty gritty if you really want to. But it just comes down to, like, in the end, it comes down to search space, right? Because in a sense, like, what Bitcoin mining is actually doing, it's doing like a mathematical game of hide and go seek, right? We've hidden some sort of nonce or some number that represents the answer to this problem, and people have to just start digging randomly and finding places. And so quantum computers just allows you to dig a lot more fast in a lot more different places simultaneously. Silicon-based computers, they operate in a linear way typically, although that's not entirely true. But quantum computers allow you to just do things simultaneously, and so it allows you to search a much larger area in a much shorter period of time to be able to find things much more efficiently. And so what you can do is just by making the area larger. And how we calculate that area right now is based on the hash, right? The difficulty of Bitcoin is not is represented as a hash, which is about 64 characters of a hexadecimal representation. And so the max size of difficulty is relative to that actual number, right? How large the hash number can actually get, which is actually quite large, mind you, but still not large enough that quantum computers can't, fuck around with. So we'd have to change the search area. And I'm not an expert on quantum computing or Bitcoin hashing necessarily either, but you'd have to change the hash to be, instead of being a 64 character hash, to be something larger. It doesn't have to be necessarily significantly larger, because with every character you add, you're exponentially increasing the search area. It's not like a linear relationship, it's an exponential relationship. So if you were to increase from 64 characters to 128 characters, theoretically, you wouldn't be doubling the amount of space that you could be searching. You'd be like, multiplying it by, I don't even know what number it would be. It'd be like 85,000 duodectillion quadrillion fucking something crazy, really.
Right, just crazy
Some
exponentialization.
mathematical number that our people,
Right.
human brains couldn't function with. But even introducing just one additional character would create, an exponential effect to the search space, even a single character. So that's one way of doing it. People argue that methodology perspective, And the reason why they might say this is because if you get to a situation where quantum computers are now mining Bitcoin and along with silicon computers, then you get in a situation where every silicon computer is so effectively slow, right, in terms of its ability to process, it becomes a very quote unquote slow miner, right? And you already
I
see
think
slow
the
miners.
worry about quantum though is not to the ability to mine Bitcoin, but to reverse engineer an address, and so essentially like be able to
Yeah.
devolve the private key essentially. But
Yes, that's another thing. You're absolutely right about that. I thought you were referring just about the hashing. I thought
yeah,
should,
I mean, I would think if you were
ask
going to
about.
develop a quantum-based sort of like cryptography, you could just basically start a whole new network at that point. That's a different
Yeah.
thing. But I was just talking about like just the safety of your private key based on where the like the level of brute force attack that a quantum system might be able to do in 15 years. And 15 years goes by quite quickly, I might add. Like I remember when like if you were there when like some of the earliest like I don't know monitors were created, and look at the 8K thing you can buy at like your Sam's Club now for like $3,000. It's obnoxious how much like where tech goes in such a short time. And if you look at like right now, look at GPT and all the other drama behind it. I think a lot of people did not predict 2023 would be, we would have the level of capability of GPT-4 and things like that. So there's this sort of acceleration happening, even with quantum, like so many of the defense industry and big players like IBM, Google, etc. So many significant like large companies are doing research there. So there are like job openings out the wazoo, by the way, in case anyone's interested. So like the thing is like there is a kind of takeoff of that happening in terms of people learning it and people developing on it. And so I think sometimes the speed with which things can arise may be faster than you think, and the corrections to BTC or any other system may not be as quick as we want. And like people bring up the Y2K thing. Remember, Chad? Remember Y2K? Like the systems are going to crash and all hell's going to break loose and blah blah blah, right? But a lot was done over like a period of 5 to 7 years to correct for Y2K related problems. And therefore, like when the event actually happened, it became a non-event. So there are some examples of where like you preempted a catastrophe, but I'm just wondering how far the Bitcoin community has gotten in thinking about it. As like it's not a good idea to bury your head in the sand, is what I'm saying.
Y2K was a kind of a funny one because in that instance, the reason why people were so fearful is because the year was always represented in a lot of code to be two numbers, like 98, 99, and then like 2000 would represent the year 1900, not the year 2000, which would cause banks and how they measure interest rates and blah, blah, blah to go all haywire because it's now 1900, not the year 2000. In hindsight, we were a little over extremely concerned about that. It was not like even that hard of a problem. Just like change that from a 2-digit year to a 4-digit.
There were some
year,
fun T-shirts though, right?
There was definitely like a lot of people panicking for sure, and people were like literally waited for like midnight and then make sure the lights were still on. Like they were literally afraid up to the second that the lights would turn off. But even with the idea of like breaking somebody's key, right, with a quantum computer, it's actually the same thing as what I was saying about the hashing, because a private key is actually for Bitcoin is actually also 64 bits length, right? We have different ways of representing that private key, that 64 bits. We could do it through a bit. I think it's called BIP 39. I would hopefully get the number right. I think it's BIP 39, where you can have those words, like trampoline and fox and forest or whatever the hell the words are. I think there's 2063 words in the BIP 39 specification. And that's just a way of just describing that 64 bits. And so if you wanted to break up somebody's private key and to brute force it with a quantum computer, you'd have to find their public key and figure out how much Bitcoin they had. And they have lots of Bitcoin in there. You want to take it from them. And you just start iterating through every permutation of those 64 characters, which I think is represented in alphanumeric letters and numbers and non-case sensitive. and you just iterate through those until you find one that works, right? One that actually generates a wallet with actual funds in it. Like, but if you were to do this today, if you had a really fast computer and you were doing 1 trillion guesses per second, right? If you're doing like a 1 or 2 trillion guesses per second, you still would not find a wallet with actual money in it before the sun would encompass the Earth and just suck it in.
Yeah.
Because at one point,
I think
the Earth
the
will.
estimated number of qubits is something like 10 million qubits, and we're at a 400 qubit computer, so it's definitely not anywhere near anything like that now. It's just that looking at the doubling time of qubits on with major systems, the doubling time seems to be quite substantial each year. That's what my thought is. Like, it's not so much, certainly not now. There's no way right now for that to make any impact at all.
Right. It's completely impractical today, but maybe quantum computers will one day make that different. And then all you have to do, effectively, is add a 65th character, right? Get rid of your old wallet, get a new wallet with 65 characters instead of 64 characters, right? And now you've just like exponentially increased the difficulty on the quantum computer to guess what your private key is. And so you can easily scale this up, as high as you want to go. It doesn't really matter today whether you have 12 words or 24 words in your mnemonic phrase. They are, for all intents and purposes, they are the same security. Mathematically, they are obviously not the same security. They're not even close to each other from a mathematical perspective. But they're both extremely fucking high that you can't discern the difference from any normal practical perspective.
Yep, but I do think but the only reason I brought all this up is just like the long-term view. It's like for countries and large companies and all to adopt, there are these sort of like lingering concerns people are going to have, right? It's like if something happened to sort of like the Fed's computer or whatever, the presumption would be they just manufacture more money, right? Like, it's as simple as that. Like, and that's the end of it. Like, but when you have a trustless, decentralized system, that trustlessness needs to be absolute, and you don't have to worry about this sort of thing. And I think at some scale, countries probably would worry about this sort of thing. Countries generally, if they're going to be moving, let's say, into Bitcoin as their let's say their primary currency, the so-called Bitcoinization. These would not be things that aren't talked about. You know what I mean? Like, it's there is a lingering concern that these systems could accelerate a lot quicker than one thinks, and you have all your nation's money in there. Now what? Right? It gets interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think your Y2K analogy was a good one, just because it was a lot of fear and concern and people freaking out for something that is easily fixable. It's not even like, to me, to my knowledge, and I'm not a quantum computing expert or anything like this, but to make things difficult enough for to be quantum computer resistant is not the most difficult thing in the world to crack. It's actually quite simple. So I think it's very Y2K, and that people can freak out now because theoretically the whole world could come down. But like, in reality, we'll fix it. We'll move on. Whatever.
Hi, sorry to interrupt. I just had a quick question for THORChain. I have like 10 more minutes, and I know I don't mean to interrupt your conversation. I just want to get a question in really quick in regards to THORChain.
Go for it, man.
Shoot.
Okay, cool. It's in regards to the lending system. Still trying to wrap my head around the lending system, chat. Maybe like in a few minutes, could you just maybe break it down? So let's say I have 1,000 rune, and I'm trying to borrow against it. Where does the let's say I borrow, can I borrow USDC or USDT against it? If so, how much, and where does the funds come from? Don't you have to sell the rune to USDT, or where does it come from? That's really my main question, to avoid any dilemma in the regular lending systems.
Yeah. So a couple things. One is the network will not allow you to use Rune as the collateral in a loan. You have to use some sort of exogenous capital. Probably at launch time, it'll just be Bitcoin and Ethereum, and those are the only two assets that will be allowed on day one. We can have discussions and arguments about expanding to other assets later, but that's the first thing. Second thing is, most of the time in DeFi lending, there's a market that's created by some sort of protocol, and then there's somebody who is the lender, like some person walks up, becomes a lender, and somebody who's the borrower from that lender, and they kind of get matched through some sort of protocol between the two of them, which would be a compound or an Aave or something like this. THORChain is structured a little bit different than those. Not a little bit, actually, a lot different from those. And so instead of the somebody providing you the debt that you receive, some person in the market, it's the protocol itself, right? So then the question becomes, well, where does the protocol get that money, right? And effectively, it takes the collateral that you gave it to produce it. So you might give the network, $10,000 worth of BDC, and the network might give you $3,000 in debt. And so it takes that $10,000 of BDC, it takes some small part of that 3,000 bit of it, and then effectively acquires whatever asset that you want to receive on the other side. It could be Ethereum or USDC or something else. It's more complicated than what I'm kind of explaining this moment than just that. But because you're always the collateral you're providing is always orders of magnitude more valuable than the debt that you're receiving, then there's always value there to be lent back to you as your debt. Does that make sense?
Want to call out, we just brought up Zooko, absolute OG of OGs in the Bitcoin space, obviously founder of Zcash, I believe. And hey, welcome, man.
Oh,
really
hi
good
there.
to hear from you.
Thanks for inviting me. I guess I'm late.
How's it going, Zooko? You and I haven't talked in a while.
I haven't talked in a while. No.
No, I mean, you and I haven't talked in a while. You and I haven't had
yeah.
a conversation in a while.
Yeah. We were supposed to meet up in Colorado at some point. Fell through.
Yeah, unfortunately true. Yeah, I was looking forward to it. Just couldn't get it to get the timing to work out, I guess. I was actually just talking about you on the stage just, half hour ago, or it was, and I was telling people your Zcash story of how you came to create it and found it.
Did you hear me or no?
I hear you now. I couldn't hear
What
you
I was
before.
going to ask is, what is essentially the design difference between THORChain and Aave, for example? Why can't Aave and all the other lending DeFi lending protocols implement the same system without getting liquidated? Where's the differentiation? What makes the THORChain lending system so different than all the other ones? I know you can get liquidated, but what's the design difference there?
This is kind of a bigger conversation. I'm trying to see if I can keep it
Yeah.
short and simple. But
Yeah, maybe we should just get into this another time. There's already a bunch of resources about THORFi, so we've already been on for almost 2 hours. Just got to go up here, so let's just give it just a little bit more, and then we can go about lending like next week or so.
Yeah, and check out the YouTube video. Chad B did a YouTube video that went pretty deep on it, so that might be
Okay, I'll do that.
place.
Is it on Chad's channel or THORChain's channel?
Look at the article that's pinned to the top here, and there's a couple resources about lending, and there's a bunch of links. There's probably about 3 to 5 really good videos on lending, people asking questions, and you can get a deep dive.
All right, sweet, thank you.
no worries. How are you, Zooko? What's going on in your world?
I'm good. Life is good. For those who don't know, I should explain that you said I'm the founder of Zcash, and I'm definitely one of the founders of Zcash, but there's a lot of others too. And now I'm the CEO of something called the Electric Coin Company, which is one of the organizations that supports and improves Zcash. But Zcash is quite decentralized, and there's a lot of other organizations that are totally outside of me and of the Electric Coin Company. Just so y'all know, that's my context.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I should have said co-founder and I said founder. That's my bad.
Oh, no problem.
Cool.
So,
Chad, what were you?
Proofs. I posted a link in the Twitter thread where Satoshi was trying to figure out how to use zero knowledge proofs to fix the privacy leak in Bitcoin. And he said something like, if we could figure out how to do this, it would make a much better and more usable version of Bitcoin. But at the time, they couldn't, the technology wasn't advanced enough.
Yeah, we were just discussing this earlier. Me and Sifi here, Sifi. I can never pronounce the name correctly, so apologies. But Sefi, sorry, me and Sefi were discussing this earlier about the practicality, problems of like having an open ledger to just make simple purchases can become problematic by nature.
Yeah, I'm convinced that the Bitcoin architecture is like fundamentally flawed based on information theory, because if it leaks private user information, it's difficult or probably impossible to fix that leak sort of on top of it. Like once your private data has been leaked to your enemy, then it doesn't matter whatever else you do to try to compensate for that. Your enemy still got you.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable thought, right? Like I'm not really a Bitcoin maxi by any stretch, as anybody would probably guess of me, but it makes sense to me that you having the ability or choice to be able to maintain your privacy, even if it's not like super secure privacy, like anti-government level privacy, but privacy enough on a personal or corporate level, that's still to me very valuable.
Yeah, everyone needs it for almost everything. Some people just don't realize yet that they need it for what they're doing.
Privacy is normal.
Yeah, privacy is normal. That's a good rallying cry, especially in our modern era where some like mega corporations and governments are trying to sort of rewrite history to say like, oh, privacy is this weird thing that it would be really scary and dangerous if we had it. And I'm like, no, wait. That's totally not the way the world has ever worked.
Sorry, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I just wanted to add like a color on the conversation as well. I wanted to share like a quote that I really liked on this on private money. This is from Alan's. I can't pronounce his last name, but Alan's In Defense of Private Money. I think it's like a mind-blowingly good article that really elegantly explains like why money laundering is a red herring. He basically says like money laundering is effectively like presenting a sum of money as having like a mundane origin. And if you think about it, really, that's pretty much every transaction. Like the reason why $1 equals $1, like dollar is basically like fungible, or at least we treat it that way, is that we don't care about its history, right? Like it's like a bearer asset. If you hold it, it's yours, and that's it. And otherwise, if you really think about like um, the other way, which means like if the history of like the chain of ownership of an asset is important or should be tracked, like you can't really do economic activities on it, because every time you receive an asset, now you have to validate yourself that all of the chain of history, like ownership, is effectively like valid, it's not corrupted or anything. So it like leads into this like logic that you're always proven like basically guilty until you prove like yourself innocent. Like you have to do all of that work every time you transact, so it's just like not doable at all. And that's it's so absurd that people like don't realize that. So I just wanted to like mention that.
Yeah, reducing friction of transactions is really critical for a prosperous economy. And you need privacy. Like the traceability adds friction to transactions. So I would agree with you on that. Can you post a link to that article you mentioned by Alan someone?
Yeah, it's Alan from I'll do it. He works in Neptune Cash at the moment, but his like last name is very hard to pronounce, so sorry for that. But I will retweet that. So if you go to my profile, you'll probably see it now.
Okay.
Yeah. or pretty much anyone interested. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it on the website ASZ.inc, ASZ.ink, and it is on this blog somewhere. Just search "In Defense of Private Money" and Allen, and it's there. I swear you'll find it. But thanks for calling that out, Con. I'm definitely going to check that article out.
By the way, Zooko, like within the THORChain community, we've discussed many times about the idea of like adding coins like Monero and Zcash and things alike. And I'm still very bullish on getting those done. I would love to see Zcash added.
I was wondering what happened, because I know that Eric Voorhees and a THORChain treasury and the Zcash treasury, which is a separate independent thing that I have nothing to do with, collectively put in funds to integrate Zcash into THORChain, and that was more than a year ago. It never happened, and I never quite understood it was technical and or political reasons that has slowed it down.
Yeah, from my memory, and I could be out of latest sync on these things, but like there's some Bitcoin libraries that we utilize in order to support the UTXO chains, which some of these libraries are not forked by the Zcash community and written quite yet and modified yet. I think that was the initial problem. I mean, it's not insurmountable. But then there was also political issues too, where for some people in the community, they're afraid that THORChain itself is not yet decentralized enough, or to be resilient against government attacks of some kind. And so they don't want to poke the bear by adding a Monero, adding a Zcash, and poke the government bear and say, hey, you should pay attention to THORChain and you should start trying to regulate it or shut it down or whatever. They were just kind of fearful poking that political bear, before we have more nodes that are bare metal at least, or something like this.
It would potentially useful data point is that Coinbase and Gemini and Kraken list Zcash in the United States and in other countries.
Yeah, very good point. Solid point. Yeah, I actually don't think it's maybe that could be arguably different, just because those ones are KYC'd, and therefore it's more difficult for some malicious entity to, what's the name of that North Korean group, Lazarus Group or something like this. Yeah, that's it. Lazarus Group to transact, whereas in a THORChain, doesn't really KYC or block addresses or anything like this, and so a Lazarus Group could use it. But I also argue that I don't think that would happen just because Tornado Cash got censored by, not even by the government per se, just by a specific entity, but because they siphoned through $6 billion plus worth of ether throughout the larger pool on Tornado Cash. For us, it would be different, because I doubt that the Monero or the Zcash pools would have enough liquidity, enough depth in them to be able to push through $6 billion. Like, that would just be, the pools would have to be incredibly deep in order to support trades of that size through its own pool. So it wouldn't be a practical use for huge volumes of Zcash or huge volumes of Monero to be quote unquote cleansed through.
There's no evidence that Lazarus Group has used Zcash for anything yet, although I do use Zcash to buy my coffee for like $3.25 a day.
Well, you're part of the problem, Zooko. That's you buy your coffees. Is the
so
issue here.
Can you tell me what changes in the world of Zcash would accelerate THORChain integrating with Zcash?
Well, I'll tell you this. So one of the THORChain devs has kind of run off into a dark corner, and has been working on a Monero integration for the last couple of months or so. Mm-hmm. And one of the ideas that is being tossed around that makes people feel more comfortable is creating a new THORChain, chain, a fork, if you want to call it that, called, the temporary name we're giving it is THORChain Black. And in THORChain Black, it would probably just be, in my opinion, it would just be, a new Rune asset, Rune Black, whatever the hell that is. And then there'd be a THORChain pool with Rune versus Rune Black. And then there'd be a Monero Rune Black pool. And then there'd be a Zcash and Rune Black pool. And so this separate entity, this separate blockchain, a separate, protocol would do all the privacy related things. so that in the event that the government gets all spicy about some shit and gets their ass in a tiffy, that we can just, we can shut down the black part, and then the rest of the beast keeps on going on, right? Without putting the rest of the THORChain network at risk. That's one of the arguments, or one of the discussions that's being going on. Personally, I'd rather just see those things, Zcash and Monero, be integrated THORChain right now. That's just my 2 cents. I would love to just forget about the whole black thing and just go direct. But there's arguments and debates internally whether using a separate network for this is the way to do it.
Are those arguments and debates informed by lawyers?
Nope, not at all.
Oh yeah, because the things I've publicly heard are pretty general. Like the government hates privacy, which is so general of a statement that it's not actually true or false, right? There's a lot of ways in which privacy is required by law in the United States and Europe and so forth, so it gets really, really nuanced, and maybe you guys should talk to a lawyer and get some actual expert advice on it.
Yeah, I think the general community is, and to some extent myself as well, is basing our decisions on just kind of hearsay information for the most part, and people just kind of getting their feeling sense of it, and that can obviously push a governance or a DAO or what do you want to call it in a certain direction, just based on false or fake information, or not just having the bits. I know Chris was just raising his hand. Hopefully his mic is working this time, because earlier he was having some problems.
Sorry about earlier. I'm on Starbucks Wi-Fi now, so it's much better. No, I was just wondering, with regard to Zcash and THORChain, and your concern about a government crackdown, what would that government crackdown look like, and why wouldn't you have the same problem with every other cryptocurrency if Coinbase, etc., are okay with using Zcash unshielded? It seems like it's kind of apples and apples. And what are you worried about as far as a crackdown? Crackdown on node operators?
Well, I'm personally not really worried about it at all, personally. But I'll speak for the community, or maybe Kyle or Thoreau wants to speak for the community and give their voice a perspective. But I think generally the concern is that either just make running a validator illegal or something like this, or it would just cause attention and scrutiny and discussions and become a target of some legal attempt, or people are actually told me that I should be concerned, I'm gonna go to jail personally, this kind of thing, which I'm not really terribly concerned about. But people are just concerned that it's just gonna that THORChain is not decentralized enough to withstand a government shutdown or attack of some kind. I don't know. I'm not concerned about it.
Yeah, I would argue that you couldn't actually shut down, especially with the key share backups that we started doing. Even if you somehow were able to, call up AWS and, do a coordinated shutdown of every single Thor node, the network would be back up and running within a week, even if you took down every single currently active validator. With the current method of backing up the TSS key shares to the chain, it's actually a very robust system where you'd be able to just spin up a new node from anywhere, import your mnemonic, and then just keep the network going, just resume right back from where we started. So even in the event of a complete coordinated crackdown, so you somehow shut down every single Thor node at the exact same time, all the funds are still secure in that TSS vault, and it would just be a matter of the node operators restoring their backups and getting the show running again.
I would argue.
Yeah, since
I would argue that any concern you have about integrating Zcash is actually a concern just in general, because the government could crack down on THORChain at any moment, because THORChain is running an exchange, basically. So what steps are being taken? Those steps should be taken now to do whatever is necessary to avoid that, because that could happen tomorrow without Zcash.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that really was exactly the community concern. It was more around timing than around philosophy. I would say the entire community was philosophically aligned. It was more so, and this was a hotter debate at a certain time. I forget exactly when.
Because it was right after the Tornado Cash sanctions.
Yeah, exactly. So, Yeah, it was more that it was just is THORChain ready for that? And I mean, a lot of I don't know the current stats on it, but there's definitely been a bigger push towards bare metal. There's been like the backup that Cal was just talking about. So yeah, I think it's moving in the direction to be more resilient in general, such that it would be much more ready to take on privacy.
Yeah, we have made advancements in becoming more protected or more decentralized since the Tornado Cash event way back when. Obviously, there's more to go. I think last time I looked, I think we had I want to say 8% or so of our nodes are now bare metal, or maybe 10% now, or something like this. The bear market has actually pushed more nodes to become bare metal because it's much more cheap and efficient to run a node as a bare metal than running it on AWS. But also that also means that the number of nodes that are running on AWS or DigitalOcean or bare metal, that any of these things could be shut down. You could literally kill all the AWS nodes right now, and it's not enough nodes that it would actually cause the network to even stop functioning. You could actually still churn and still be able to not churn but hypothetically, if the government was against and told AWS to shut us down, they would probably also tell DigitalOcean. We couldn't sustain both of those and not pause the network. But those people would be able to run those nodes, could just rebuild those nodes on Hetzner or bare metal or I don't know, Google's, I don't know, any provider they want, and with the same private keys, and then carry on like nothing happened.
Yeah, I think the whole thing with just integrating new chain, it's just become a very sticky governance debate in terms of dev resources and stuff like that. So it's definitely not all charged by we think the government's going to do this or that. It's just we have relatively small dev team and other priorities like lending and things like that, and just haven't really done a lot of chain integrations as of late in the past year or so.
Well, I remember that there is funding allocated from those three sources I mentioned for Zcash integration. So maybe that could provide the necessary dev resources.
There should be no greater priority than decentralizing this network, in my opinion, for what it's worth.
Yeah, there's a lot of priorities in the Coast network. So we can talk about decentralization, which is obviously very important, and we are continuing to push on that. We can talk about adoption and integrations. That's a very important thing. We try to get integrated with more wallets and dexes. We can talk about major new features, whether that be lending or order books or savers or something like this that is providing a valuable service that the community and the industry as a whole does not have access to it all today. All the things are very important things, and decentralization is definitely one of those things on the list.
You don't think decentralization is the number one most important thing that you guys could be doing right now?
I don't know how to quantify how important one thing is over the other, to be honest with you. To me, it's not a comparative thing of we either push on decentralization or we push on integrations and that kind of thing. It's just more of we burn the candle at both ends. So we're constantly pushing for more volume, more swaps, more decentralization, more this, more that. And I don't find them to be antithetical to each other. So we just push them all simultaneously.
Hey, allow me to say again, I think if you talk to an expert lawyer who's worked in this field and advised lots of other people in similar situations, you'd really get a ton of valuable and actionable information in a short time. So they're super expensive. You'd probably spend thousands of dollars, I guess, but that's not super expensive in the grander scheme of things. And it wouldn't take very much of your time. I definitely strongly advise you, give it a shot and see what you get out of that. I can recommend a bunch of really expert lawyers who know a lot about this stuff.
Yeah, that actually would be great. It actually would be fun, and not only to educate and inform myself and other kind of core devs and Nine Realms people, but also inform and educate the community at large. Maybe we can even do one of these Twitter Spaces with one of the people that you recommend. That would be really fun and interesting and informative conversation to be had.
Mm-hmm.
I'll DM you later on Twitter and we'll give me the info, and we'll sync up.
I could save you a few $1,000s right now. Do everything possible to get all the nodes off AWS and DigitalOcean, etc. Chad goes anon, Chad, leave the project, come back anonymous, please, and do stuff like that to remove all of these. Because the lawyer's just gonna. I mean, I'd be worried that a lawyer is gonna make it worse, depending on which lawyer you get. I mean, at the end of the day, you just have to decentralize the network, or else you're done,
Why do you say?
or you get captured.
Why do you say that I have to leave and come back in on? What threat do I pose to the network?
You're the lead developer of the network.
So what threat do I pose?
You're a target, man. I mean, you are
Okay.
the THORChain target.
But it has nothing to do with THORChain, right? Like, if I were to get arrested today, what would happen to THORChain? Anything?
I don't know. I don't know how many nodes you run. I don't know what kind of influence you have over a lot of the parts of it. So I don't know.
If I run nodes, and it has nothing to do with me being a developer, right? Or just being a node operator, in which case it doesn't really matter if I'm a developer or not. That's a general statement against operators, I suppose.
Look, man, my point is, I honestly don't know the answer to what it would do to the network, but it would suck for you, and it would suck for development of the network because you're the lead dev.
I'll tell you this though, it would definitely suck for me, but if I get arrested on the idea of writing code, that I would in some ways be excited about, just because it gives me an opportunity to establish that code is free speech, to be honest with you. Like, it'd be a terrible fight for me to have, but that's a fucking fight that I'd be willing to take, because code is free speech. And anybody who wants to tell me that I can't write code is a fucking asshole.
You'll be even better prepared for that fight if you talk to a lawyer.
I agree with you, man. I would actually love to talk to your lawyer. I think it'd be great to have a conversation, and we can invite this gentleman onto this, or woman, I should say, to this space, or maybe a Discord or whatever. So let me DM you later, just get some information. And Chris,
Okay.
don't get me wrong. I appreciate your input and advice as well, Chris.
My general point. I don't want my general point to get lost, which was that, in my opinion, the top priority for THORChain should be to remove these points of centralization. Whether or not Chad being public is a point of centralization that should be addressed is up for debate, of course. But as far as nodes go, it could come at any moment. It could come tomorrow. And so if that comes tomorrow, then what happens? The rest of the work is out the window. That's my point. And so, I think identifying those points of centralization, the nodes are the most obvious, but, identifying them are key, and addressing them is immediate. This is the one, the largest factor for me in trusting THORChain as an ongoing project. I think that the lack of priority, the lack of emphasis on this critical existential thing is what holds me back from being a full-throated advocate of THORChain.
Yeah, kind of going off of what I was saying earlier about these key share backups, let me just reiterate how important this is. So, it's we've talked a lot about getting nodes off of cloud services and onto bare metal, and we haven't found there really isn't a way to say definitively, oh, this for the network to determine, hey, this node is running on bare metal, so let's increase their rewards, or give them some kind of reward to give as a carrot to say hey, we need to incentivize bare metal, because you can't at the Thor node level. And I might be speaking a little bit over my head here, so Chad, please jump in if I'm saying something that's wrong. At the Thor node level, you wouldn't be able to say hey, this client is being run on a bare metal server versus one that's at Amazon. There's just no way to there's no way to trustlessly say that you are running on this type of hardware or this other type of hardware. So by having something like this key share backup system, nodes can continue to run wherever they run currently today. And even if 100% of Thor, even if it became universal law that THORChain nodes were illegal and you weren't allowed to run them, and all of them were shut down at the very same exact instant, the network would be able to come online again extremely quickly, just on other providers, on bare metal, wherever anyone could spin up their Thor node again, because the people who are running Thor nodes obviously stake a lot of Rune in order to do so and have a lot at stake. So they're very incentivized to re-spin up their nodes if they were to get shut down, obviously. Otherwise, they're just losing their entire stake in the network. But it makes it so that way the network is actually capture resistant. So that way, if everything were to disappear tomorrow, the network would come back online just because everything is already backed up, and there's nothing that would be permanently lost just from nodes going offline for a couple hours or days or even weeks.
That's cool.
Yeah, I think one of the problems that we have, and I think this is something that Chris was pressing on a moment ago, is that how do we get people who run nodes today to move from providers like AWS and onto bare metal? And part of the issue is that we can't actually enforce it. We can't hold a gun to people's heads and say you have to do it this way. I don't know how a reasonable way for us to do that. And if we were to do that, we would lose a lot in the bond. Like, we actually become more centralized because maybe a lot of nodes would just walk away because they lack the technical skill to run bare metal. Because running bare metal is much more complex than running, an AWS node. Running actual physical hardware takes some knowledge and understanding. Running your own firewalls, like all this stuff, is a skill set that you don't really require today if you're running on AWS, but it does if you're running bare metal. And so, the act of forcing everybody to become bare metal would cause less nodes to exist, which would cause them to be more centralized, and then also, cause the inherent problems that come with that. And so it's a difficult problem. But I think part of the way to solve that, the only reasonable way that I can think to solve that, and Chris, if you've got any ideas, let me know. I'd be happy to listen to them, is education, right? Is informing and educating, giving documentation to our node operators. They're like, hey, if you want to run bare metal, but you're not really quite sure how to do it, here's a good walkthrough guide to show you how to set up this kind of thing, this firewall with this ports open like this, blah, 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 these things, to kind of lower the technical requirements in some sense or form. But if you have any other ideas how to become more decentralized, Chris, I'm more than happy to listen. And if we can move forward in this regard, let's fucking move forward in this regard. I mean, we all agree that decentralization is the key here. So we want to move as far down this road as possible.
I'd be happy to help brainstorm, if you want to do that. I know that you guys have been talking about this for like a year or two, right? So I'm sure there's plenty of great ideas that have been tossed around that I don't know about. So, yeah. But I'd be happy to chime in and have a chat for sure.
Yeah, in terms of infrastructure, bare metal is probably the most important thing, and that's something that we're we're doing much better at. We had almost no bare metal. I think we had 1 or 2 bare metal a year ago, and today I think we have 10 of them or something like this, or 9 or 10 or something like this. So we're definitely going in the right direction. It's actually economics that's pushing people towards bare metal because it's just much more profitable to run a node on bare metal than it is on AWS, and so it's just especially in the downturn of the bear market, it's just naturally pushing people towards bare metal in the bear market. But yeah, if this we can convince more people to run bare metal, that's probably the biggest win we can make.
I think it's a totally reasonable way to look at it, based on what you're saying before about how the network would centralize if people stopped running the AWS nodes, etc. But I would actually look at it from the point of view of treat the network today as if all those node operators received a notice, and were told to go offline today. And what would the network look like then? It would be even worse, probably, because none of them would have had time to move to bare metal, and they would have all just been forced offline one way or another, either technically forced or out of fear, which is more likely. So I think that's a more prudent way to look at it from an adversarial point of view. And I think that in that case, it makes sense to really prioritize getting, even if it's 10, 20% of them, giving them the incentive they need to move to bare metal.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of when China, I think it was 3 of the provinces in China 2 years ago, had banned Bitcoin mining, and the hash rate of Bitcoin mining just dropped in half. If you guys remember when this happened a couple of years ago, just because China said no more Bitcoin mining in these 3 provinces, and eventually people just kind of broke down their hardware, moved it to some that came to the United States, some stayed to a neighboring country, and rebuild it. And today the hash rate of Bitcoin is actually higher today than it was 2 years ago. I think conceptually the same would occur here. It might cause a disruption to the network temporarily for people to rebuild their infrastructure, but it probably would not stop it. At least their nodes are highly incentivized to make it not stop it, otherwise they lose millions of dollars.
Can I ask a question to Zuko?
Yeah, shoot.
Yeah,
Yo.
I'm just like, it's gonna be a very like generic question, but I'm quite curious on like roadmap of Zcash and like what is next for Zcash. What are some things that you guys focus about like as electric coin company? I know that recently the amount of shielded Zcash has reached an all-time high in the
Yeah.
network, which is pretty good.
Mhm.
Are you noticing any like changing user behavior or like pretty much anything that interests you?
Yeah,
Would listen.
I can answer briefly. There's a ton of things going on, and most of it is being done by organizations outside of the Electric Coin Company. There's a couple other organizations that are working on extending Zcash to support arbitrary tokens, like ERC20 style things that can take advantage of all the Zcash L1 features, including the privacy. There's people working on getting shielded support in hardware wallets like Ledger and Trezor. There's quite a few mobile apps under development by different parties. There's probably a bunch of things I'm forgetting. Over here at Electric Coin Company, the main thing we're focusing on right now is that the Zcash network has. You asked about if there's. You said that there's an all-time high in the amount of ZEC shielded. True. And you asked if there's been differing user behavior. Yes, for almost a year now, there's been some anonymous person or persons who occasionally show up and generate really large shielded transactions. So it could be that these transactions have like thousands of recipients, or it could be that they're sending thousands of change back to themselves or whatever. Nobody knows because it's all shielded. And that has overloaded the network in various parts, especially the mobile wallets running on smartphones. About 3 out of 5 of the shielded mobile wallets are currently broken because they can't handle the load. So at Electric Coin Company, what we're currently prioritizing is just optimizing the mobile wallets and the other parts of the network so it can handle the current load level. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. That's very interesting. Could you maybe expand a bit on, just because I'm ignorant on that aspect, the Ledger shielded support? What is the problem there? And yeah,
Trezor and Ledger have both supported. So for context, Zcash has both transparent addresses and shielded addresses. Transparent addresses look just like Bitcoin, and they are perfect if you want that balance to be publicly transparent all the time. For some reason, like that's somebody else's funds that are being custodied, or it's a bridge where you want to have a live real-time visibility into the status of those funds. So that's transparent addresses. And they're also, transparent addresses are perfect for integrations, such as with THORChain, because they work just like Bitcoin, and you don't need privacy at that layer. The users get their privacy from having their funds stored in shielded addresses, and then the infrastructure like CEXs and DEXs and everything else can use transparent addresses. So anyway, that's the architecture of the Zcash L1. And Trezor and Ledger have always, for many years, have supported storing your Zcash in your hardware wallet, but only if it's stored in a transparent address in the hardware wallet. So that's not ideal. That's where you do want shielded addresses to protect the users. And so both of them have said, the two companies have said that they're doing work to implement shielded addresses in their hardware wallets, but it's been a long time and I can't tell how much progress they're making. But that's one of those things that is being done by other parts of the Zcash ecosystem that's outside of my knowledge or control.
wow, it's interesting. I didn't know that. So effectively, that means whatever the number, I think it was like 10% or something. 10% of Zcash is being shielded, like approximately, if I'm not mistaken. That means all those users like can't leverage Ledger and Trezor.
Absolutely,
So,
that's right.
yeah.
All that shielded Zcash is not on a Ledger or a Trezor. It's in like a full node, running on a laptop or desktop, or it's maybe in a paper wallet if you put it into a shielded address and then wrote down your private key, or it's on a mobile phone. Yeah, and it's a lot of Zcash. I would imagine a lot of people have told me that what they really want is to store their wealth shielded in a hardware wallet. So I would imagine that once one or both of those companies deliver, that there will be a lot more Zcash moving into the shielded pool.
Hey Zuko, isn't there a Monero app for Ledger? Why is there not a Zcash shielded app for Ledger?
I don't know.
I mean, I'll say, like,
if you're a Ledger customer, go open a support request for Ledger on asking them for shielded Zcash support.
Well, I think it was the Monero app was built by the Monero community. I think. I'm just wondering if there's a technical reason that the Zcash shielded.
I know there is a bunch more to it, which I don't 100%, because again, it's thank God it's a decentralized ecosystem, so I don't have to understand and influence a bunch of stuff. So I'm not 100% sure I understand what's going on, but there have been a couple of funded projects to implement shielded addresses inside Ledger. I know that it's a difficult technical problem because to use a shielded address requires generating a zero knowledge proof, and generating a zero knowledge proof is heavyweight in terms of memory usage, and hardware wallets have really constrained RAM levels. And I did hear just recently, like only a few weeks ago, that the Zcash Community Grants Program, which is another thing that I have nothing to do with, gave a grant to a new developer who said he could implement shielded addresses inside, I think, Ledger, one of those wallets, right away. So anyway, there is forward motion on it.
Yeah, we've had our own struggles with Ledger and getting like just regular THORChain transactions supported. You still need to be on like developer mode to even use to get a THORChain address on your Ledger. You can't do it from Ledger Live or anything like that. It's working with it. Even though like it's a decentralized ecosystem, they still very much have full control of the stack of anything that goes into Ledger itself, and they're very protective of that. So it might not even be like a physical constraint like that. It's just a function of just how their organization works.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that reminds me that was part of the issue. Some the Zcash Foundation, which is yet another independent, separate funded entity, funded someone to implement the Zcash shielded addresses inside Ledger, but they didn't include support in Ledger Live. I guess Ledger Live is maintained only by the Ledger company, so in order for normal users to be able to actually use it, they need it to be integrated with Ledger Live, or perhaps integrated with a different wallet that speaks to the Ledger firmware or whatever. And they also require, which I think is really cool, and I applaud it, they require a security audit from their own security team from Ledger before they add anything to Ledger Live, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, this is correct. I recall like we had our own little like THORChain app for Ledger, and there was some sort of bug we wanted to fix. It was like I think it was only like a 4-line change. It was very, very small, but it took like, I don't know, 6 or 9 months to get it approved. Like it was just ludicrously slow.
Yeah, everything takes too long.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Everything takes so much longer.
The Monero app is very difficult to use, and I think you need to run a full node. Like I think you need to use the full node wallet to use it. Definitely not Ledger Live. So when I saw that originally, which I think it's been out for a couple of years, I thought that basically anything could happen as long as Ledger's not like officially supporting it. But I guess maybe not, based on what you guys are saying as far as Zcash goes.
I'm unclear on that. Whether what I was interested in was users being able to use it like simply without having to learn and put in a bunch of effort. So I don't know if it's possible to use it using that firmware that company wrote previously. but I do know that it's not possible to use it in Ledger Live in the normal way.
Yeah, it's just how a lot of our organizations, organizations that are not like in the upper echelon of the mind space are not getting that same treatment from Ledger. And it just seems to be just the status quo of things. Like they have control over their own software and their own hardware, so they exercise it, and they make sense too, because there's like they want to be able to review everything from a security point of view, and just deliver what they think is the best user experience, but that might not always align with what the community in general wants and needs.
So Ledger has publicly said that they really want to add shielded Zcash and on Twitter and everything. So I'm going to post the link so that you guys can all fill up their mentions with polite feature requests. How's that? If you want.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So inundate Ledger with as much spam as we can to get them to move their asses.
Okay, I posted a link. I think it would have shown up in this Twitter thread. Y'all see it?
Unstoppable force meets unmovable object. Cool, guys. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. This is a fun space, a long one too, but you guys are welcome on anytime. We do these on Fridays at noon Eastern, so feel free to come hop in whenever, and we just chat about THORChain and whatever's going on in the space. So huge pleasure being able to talk with you guys this week. And I don't think Zooko's ever been on. Chris might have been on once a while ago, but
yeah, that was fun. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
Cheers. Keep up the good work on THORChain.
Thanks
so much, guys.
Bye.
Yeah. Let's
Thanks,
wrap
yeah.
and
Let's definitely do it
see
again.
y'all next week.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. And I'm happy to come back if you
Sounds
want to
good.
dive deeper into the decentralization stuff that we were supposed to talk about before.
Yeah, I'm totally down.
Yeah,
for that.
definitely want to make that happen.
Yeah.
Maybe next
Sorry
week
it
if
didn't
you're
work out
around.
so well today, but I'm
Sorry about
definitely down
that.
to do it.
I'll be on Wi-Fi next time.
So, guys, peace.